welcome everybody to the regular council meeting, Monday, January 13th, 2020. It's going to be a great year for all of us. So the first bit is the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have anything that they want to add in?
There was just those two on-table items
Yep.
that were circulated by email.
Yeah. Did everybody get those two on the table? Everything mailed to people. All right, somebody want to move that? Thank you, Maureen. Second. Thank you, Sue Ellen. All in favor? Agenda is approved. Public comments. What have we got? No?
We just have one, Paul Lucen, regarding Jacqueline Massey thing. Thanks. Sorry.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Jacqueline didn't know I was coming tonight.
Oh, good. Have a seat if you like. Paul, up to you.
I know most of you.
Yeah.
You know how excited I get about, annual reports and so on and so forth. But anyway, no, this is a pivotal moment. Jacqueline's been with us I'm with the Arts Council, been with us for really a long time. Been in front of multiple councils for many different reasons, and they all were in support of the arts. And I just want to say she's done a fabulous job for everyone in this community, and I just wanted to make sure that everyone particularly enjoyed this final annual report from Jacqueline tonight.
Thank you very much. Move on to the consent agenda. Anybody have anything that they'd like to have further clarification on? Maureen?
3.7.
Sorry?
3.7.
3.7.
2 or 3?
Three. It's all three.
It's just a quick question.
And who is that, Daniel? Okay. And Sue Ellen?
3.8.
3.8. Okay. Move those both to section 11.
Gary, do
Just
you
wondered if we
want to move that 6
Daniels,
or
yeah.
3.7 to 6.9?
Okay, yeah, you can certainly do that. So he doesn't have to stay here all week. Lovely idea. Sorry, 6.5?
Yes, sorry. My numbering is.
Okay, anybody else? All right. Consent approve the items as outlined in January 13th, 2020 consent agenda as amended. Maureen for 1, Allison 2, all in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous. No worries. All right. Delegations, Bowen Island Arts Council, 2019 annual report presentation, the last one for Jacqueline Massey.
How appropriate. I think you're supposed to walk up slowly. Sorry, Jacqueline. No. Sorry. You didn't want to stop. She's doing a presentation with performance art.
Yes.
So fun because that's really bizarre looking. Sorry about that.
No worries.
And we like
I don't know what that was. Oh, that's better. You just call it already.
Let me know when you're ready.
Hello.
hello, Jacqueline.
Thank you, Paul, for those kind words. I feel like I almost have to apologize for being here because it was something you might expect not to see. But I'm still here and I'm still very happy to be with all of you and please be presenting this annual report on our core grant funding. So I think Rod Gore is our chair of the Bowen Island Arts Council and I believe he's going to start.
Thanks, Jackie. Thank you, Mayor, Council. It's a pleasure to be here to
present in fulfillment of the requirements of our core community organization funding agreement of August 2018. It's our pleasure to present to you an overview of the cultural services and programs that we've been delivering to the community over the past year. Specifically, our agreement with the municipality stipulates that our role is to implement, in consultation with BIM Council and staff, specific aspects of the Bowen Island Cultural Master Plan, which is Bylaw 446, to work collaboratively with BIM toward developing public cultural spaces and offer a wide spectrum of arts and cultural services and programming, to collaborate with BIM community recreation staff to deliver recreational cultural services and other programming, and to act as an advisory body to council. We believe we've not only met but exceeded those expectations through our work, carried out by a team largely consisting of volunteers, led by one full-time, one seasonal full-time, and 2 part-time staff members. In developing the organization's strategic plan, the Board of Directors of the Hearth continue to prioritize the goals of the Cultural Master Plan, focusing on specific recommendations, including from recommendation 1, create cultural spaces. Some progress on through the operations of the Cove Commons and our gallery and the delivery of our ongoing programs and services, and by firmly committing to work toward the goal of establishing a community center and performing arts space, working in partnership with BIM and on the current capital project. On recommendation 4 of the Cultural Master Plan, helping artists thrive economically. We're promoting the sale of artworks in our gallery and in the library annex, and through programs such as our studio tours that broaden the exposure of artworks and increase opportunities for sales. Our presentation will begin in a moment. By employing arts facilitators, programmers, and other cultural workers whenever possible, and by participating in the Community Economic Development Committee and other bodies dedicated to exploring new opportunities for creative entrepreneurs. In recommendation 15, supporting awareness of First Nations culture through programs such as Knowing Our Place, featuring an Indigenous Authors Book Club, and the Moving Toward Reconciliation workshop that invited representatives of nonprofits and municipal government to participate in learning about Canada's history through an Indigenous lens, and by inviting First Nations writers, musicians, storytellers, and other cultural ambassadors to perform locally. And recommendation 16, create awareness and protection for cultural heritage, working with the Heritage Commission to identify, recognize, and designate the Lieben lands as a national heritage treasure. Additional priorities for us include the commitment to run a healthy, sustainable, and well-managed arts organization. This includes the development and implementation of a succession plan for our executive director, who, as you probably know, is leaving the job after more than 15 years.
Thank you for your patience, everyone. Here we go. Okay, let's try
Amazing.
that again.
Very nice. That's it, eh? That's a wrap.
So that is it. As Rob mentioned, we do have our financial statements as well, that we will leave with you, and of course, if there's any questions, we'd be happy to take them.
Oh, you got anything? Maureen?
Just a congratulations.
Yeah.
The impact of the code comments has been absolutely massive. And we had a presentation a couple of council meetings ago on the library in terms of the impact on their number of library card holders and visitors and so forth. So congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah, big year.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie, on behalf of not only the municipality, but the community at large. You know, you've been the face of BYLAWS/the Heart for many years now. You've been an incredible advocate, and you've worked so hard. I've seen you with the community center on that organization, and you're absolutely tireless. Thank you. Thank you for all you've done.
It's my total pleasure.
Sorry.
Thank you, that's great.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you very much. Okay, the turf field replacement, Shauna Jennings, Manager of Rec and Community Services.
Sorry, I don't have any music or
Let
on
them,
the fly. It's kind of hard act to follow.
really.
Okay. I don't need it for just a second. What is it? Oh, thank you.
Still listening.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. So I'm here tonight to talk about the turf field replacement project. Just to give an update and receive some direction and some information from you with regards to some of the decisions that will be coming soon with regards to that project. On September 9th, I was here before you and indicated that the turf field at Bix needs to be replaced. If you can you just hide it?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, thanks.
So much direction.
Okay. That turf field at Bix was built in 2009, so it is 10 years old and has reached its lifespan expectancy. I was also discussing the option of having been approached by the football club at that time to look at the option of putting a full-size turf field in instead of replacing the small one. So I just wanted to give an update on that, and I'll start with the update on the full-size field. So the 4 options, which hope elastomer, I'm gonna read that up.
Ethylene propyl.
Yes, thank you. Ethylene, propylene,
Deanie
Dean monomer, and organic. So I'll just do a quick run through of some of the pros and cons related to all of those, with the intent and the outcome of hopefully having some discussion around the table about which infill would be suitable for Bowen Island at this time. So the crumb rubber infill is definitely the typical industry standard currently with fields that are being built. It has good sport performance, it's the least expensive, it repurposes old automotive tires and therefore is the lowest carbon footprint of all the infills that we're going to look at tonight. It is less UV stable over a long term. Apparently the rubber breaks down. In terms of cons, public health perception and concerns and pending health studies are in the media. It has high surface temperatures and that makes the surface warm to play on. It also contributes to an off-gassing smell. It has a high level of migration, which means that the rubber crumb sticks to your clothing and your shoes and everything, and it ends up in my car, in my life,
In my septic bed.
in other places. And it's not ideal for reuse. So once this field reaches its life expectancy, the crumb rubber is not able to be reused. The next one is thermoplastic elastomer, the TPE. So it's a raw material made of food grade plastic. It mitigates the public perception concerns over CRI. This food grade plastic is also used in a lot of medical supplies, so it has that perception of, well, it is perception to be safe. It provides shock absorption and good sport performance, minimal off-gassing odor. It has a lower surface temperature, very little infill migration, so where it moves around. It requires occasional top-up. It's UV stable over long term, and it can be cleaned and reused. So the actual infill from this field can be cleaned and reused in 10 years into the next field, assuming that we go with the same infill product. The cons are that it is a higher cost than the crumb rubber. It's non-local and non-recycled product, so it is a raw material and therefore has a higher carbon footprint than the crumb rubber. EPDM is one of the other ones. Mitigates public perception, again, concerns over the CRI. This is actually a manufactured rubber material. It provides shock absorption, good sport performance, again, minimal off-gassing odor, lower surface temperature, little infill migration, does require occasional top-up, just like the TPE, and it again can be cleaned and reused. In terms of cons, it is a higher cost than the CRI, and again, a non-local, non-recycled product, so it does have a higher carbon footprint in manufacturing. And then we come to the organic.
Can that one be reused in the same field
Yes,
again
it
as
can.
well?
Yes. So the organic, which is what we currently have now, the cork and coconut husk. So the pros there are it does have good sports performance, there's zero unpleasant off-gassing, it's an organic material, it's lower surface temperatures, and there are no public perception concerns. Cons, and I think as we have seen with our own field, in fact they use us as an example, that it does not provide a suitable level of shock absorption. The maintenance requirements are high, top-up is very frequent, the infill will float and migrate frequently, so we've all seen that during a heavy rain, the infill floats to the top, and because there is a slight slant in the area where the field is, it all ends up outside the fence, closer to the road. So it kind of floats away, we lose quite a bit of infill that way. It also sticks to coats and shoes and everything and wanders all over the place. And it is a higher cost compared to CRI. This coconut infill is no longer being recommended for use in this area because of the reported operational difficulties reported by us, as well as it was Port Coquitlam had a field. Their field is also up for renewal at this time. And there is a walnut shell infill that might be a viable alternative. However, BD is recommending that would be subject to more testing before they start using it in southwestern BC. I have consulted with other municipal parks departments, and TPE has been used in 2018 in Whistler with favorable reports. They did TPE and sand. EPDM is used in Vancouver, and they also report favorable with that infill. And North Vancouver's standard TPE in there.
Right.
Is it
It's kind of rubberized plastic. So it's food grade in the sense that they use the same material to put it in children's
Products.
Yeah,
Shipped in.
yeah.
do you know what Port Coquitlam is going to choose for its renewal?
I don't.
Thank you.
Just to look ahead to that, in order to not impact or be in the way of any of our user groups, there's at least as little as possible. That leads us into preliminary design submission February 7th, March 27th, there is the final result. In terms of communication, just around all of that, communication would be around through all of BIM-ready community during construction. I have submitted a capital project request into BIM's 2020 budget for $300,000 for this project. A Class C estimate was provided by RF Binney. Rubber infill is coming in at about $215,000 with project management fees. This would be Binney's fees for the whole project management, the construction, the tendering. It's almost $36,000. $35,000 and $38,000 to have that alternative infill. So 254. Project management stays the same, and the project total with an alternative.
So standard infill is the crumb rubber.
Standard infill is the crumb rubber, yes. They price all of theirs with standard infill. So the total with an alternative infill is $289,890, so almost $290,000. These prices don't include GST. It does include the removal and disposal of the existing turf field. In terms of maintenance for each of those, all of the infills require some top-up. The organic requires the most top-up, which of course we have seen here on Bowen. Maintenance costs for top-up, however, with TPE or EPDM are estimated around $5,000 in supplies and delivery to Bowen every 2 years. Currently, we're paying between $13,000 and $15,000 annually to top up our turf field with the organic infill. The grooming also is because the turf field compacts quickly, we groom it once or twice a week during its heavy use periods, and that works out to be about $400 a month, whereas this grooming would be once every 4 to 6 weeks and would be about $100 a month with either the crumb rubber or the alternative infills.
And the crumb rubber doesn't have to be replaced as often, it sounds like.
It doesn't have to be replaced as often. It does still need to be topped up,
Yeah.
but it wasn't actually very clear as to how that compared with the alternatives.
When you say topped up, and you mentioned with the organics that it actually leaks out and escapes into the environment. Would that be the same as the top up for TPE and EPDM
It is
and
the same,
CRA?
yes.
They all
They migrate.
escape and move out into the environment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it also depends on the play. If you look at our field, a lot of the infill ends up around edges of the field, and it can be difficult to, even with grooming, to sweep it back into the middle. So some areas are looking less infilled, some are more infilled. It just seems to be the way that they go over the course of 10 years. When it snows, I've been at fields in North Vancouver that the snow, they actually plow the fields, but the snow gathers all the crumb rubber together and it melts away. And so that's kind of another way that it migrates. So it does seem that all of them would need to be topped up. However, the alternatives are not topped up as often as the organic.
Thanks, Shauna. So I support all of the recommendations, and I think this is really important, happy to have it go forward. But I'm certainly, I'm leaning towards the crumb rubber. I know that people have raised health concerns, but I've gone through the research, all the stuff that you had, and I looked at it, back a dozen years ago when this came up, and there are no real grounds to the health impacts. And if people were concerned about ingesting little bits of tires, they'd be really worried about walking near roads.
Yeah.
As our tires wear out, it becomes tiny particles that go into the deepest part of your lungs. And that's not going to happen on the true field. So anyway, I guess on the crumb rubber is the only concern that I had. I liked it because it was lower cost, $40,000 plus lower GHG, obviously, because you're using the recycled thing. But the only issue I was concerned about was its inability to be reused at the end of the 10 years. So if that ends up washing all of those saved costs, I'm not sure whether it does or not.
I'm not sure if it washes the cost. I just know that, yeah, it is not able to be reused.
So but I don't know what the overall cost of that is. I know the extra cost is $38,000.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure what the total cost of that.
If you include the replacement.
Exactly. So in other words, we'd save $40,000 right now, but then we
The
lose.
longevity of that.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
lose something in 10 years, and I'm not sure how much we lose because I don't know what the overall cost is of buying a whole plant of new crumb rubber.
Right. And what I'm,
Anyway, we don't need to decide on that now. I'm just saying, at least I don't think we do.
I think we do.
I think,
Do we?
it would be helpful if we.
I mean, I certainly agree with the non-organic because that one didn't work.
Right.
I guess I'd also want to ask the football club, that business about the heat and the smell and so on. I mean, you could ask the folks in North Van whether that's, in our climate, whether that's a huge deal or not. I kind of doubt it. I haven't heard that from anybody.
I know it's hot in the middle of summer, just from personal experience.
Yeah.
July and August, you can definitely feel the difference, being on that field versus being on a grass field. However,
Sure,
people
but
play
that would
on
be the
it
same for
all
all.
over, yeah, people
Yeah.
play on it all over the world.
Yeah.
And
Rob?
Yeah, I'm sort of with David as well. I think, and a big part of me is, $40,000. That's a lot of money, and I know I'm looking for a fitness center for my wife, and I go to our fitness center, and no offense, but it's pretty bad, and she went to another fitness center and $40,000. I mean, I'm not saying it's gonna go there, but that would outfit an entire fitness center, right? So, I think with the cost difference, and I'm from North Van, I work for the Van Commission, I've never heard an issue at all really about the crumb rubber. It seems like it's the go-to, so I think that's makes much sense.
Well, Allison first.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I mean, we need to do this because it's too hard right now. The shop had to go in underneath in the first place to save money, and it's actually been very heavily used and maybe even overused for what's there. So we need to do this. And your timing, I think you really can't do it until school's out. It's just,
right.
and so your schedule and your timing works out. And your motion is, so I guess one of my questions was whether any of the soccer people have expressed, the actual players besides yourself, expressed a desire for one of the types of fill over the other.
They haven't, although I would be able to gain that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I made a couple of inquiries to a couple of people that I know are involved with the international associations, and
Mhm.
they didn't, seem to have, much different. They were happy with sort of all of them, but I
Okay.
think there's, cork is in short supply these days too, so that's part of the reason for the cost increase, and I think the other issues with it, so I'm not bothered by Front River or the others, and if North Van's using it, I haven't heard any complaints or family members using the North Van fields, so.
Okay.
So,
I have another question, and then some comments. Is the West Van School District participating in this refit financially?
No. No, no,
Have they been asked? Because I know we've got a, yeah,
yes.
okay. I
They-
saw that they wouldn't do the expanded field, I just didn't
Right,
understand.
no, they're not contributing to the replacement.
Okay,
Or
And,
if on their property.
yeah, no, I know that. Thank you. Okay, and, well, my points, I think I'm in agreement with, generally, with the recommendations in front of us. I like the CRI, the industry standard.
Okay.
I'm a little bit concerned about it escaping into the environment, but then that's where tires wear down, and that's all escaping into the environment anyway. And this is below our water intakes for drinking water and things like that. I remember 15 years ago, I looked into this in terms of air quality and whether it should be organic or not. And at the same time, I was a parent, or had recently been a parent helping with the gymnastics club, sewing up those indoor crash mats and things. They were all full of inorganic material, and I looked into the air quality standards for indoors, and nothing that would be posed for these outdoor ones that we're looking at here as these options. None of them were outside of the indoor air standards for schools, and so that was fine with me. And so I'm also concerned about taxpayer dollars, and I think we should, as Bowen, with our current situation, I think we should go with the industry standard. However, if you come back with I like David's question about the replacement costs being factored in. If that brings down the cost over the next couple of them, of refits of the soccer field, then I would be interested in hearing that for the alternatives, the non-organic alternatives that you've got in front of us, that say we could reuse them again on site in the same spot for the same field. If that brings down the cost to match or be this, anyway, I would be interested in having that come before council.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tori?
Yeah, the recommendation in the report is that staff is recommending that council consider the alternative inorganic input, such as TPA or EPDM. So you weren't recommending the rubber.
I wasn't, and I based that on the past feedback, and the reason that we ended up with the organic infill in the first place 10 years ago was quite a community feedback and engagement around that, to the point where the field almost didn't happen because of it being a synthetic turf field, and there was some community outcry around that. We have a different community today, and
We
so
tried it.
my recommendation, we did try it. My recommendation was to look at one of those other alternatives, but I'm not recommending the rubber ground.
Okay.
Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
Just one
Sorry.
more question.
Yeah.
In the recommendation itself, the 35,000 or so, which budget is that from?
So that would be a part of the 2020 capital budget. It would be part of the replacement.
Specifically
of the-
for this capital project?
Yes.
Capital renewal and replacement fund?
It
Pardon?
would be capital renewal and replacement, so we're only looking for approval for any consulting portion. and the field replacement itself will come forward as part of the financial plan 2020 capital program requests.
Can I ask the current field lasts 10 years?
Yes.
And when we installed it, was that fair to say that was a reasonable expectation, 10 years?
It said 10 to 12 years.
Yeah, and that was what we got what we thought we were going to
We
get.
did, and the use on the field, I think, was something that nobody could have predicted because
Right.
it's been so heavily
Yeah,
used.
no, I get that. So if we look at the alternatives now, are we still looking for all of them at a 10-year window on these? Is that what
Yes,
say?
they all say 10 to 12 years.
All, so, okay.
Yeah.
My question would have been, at one said, hey, no, we're good for 15, and then
Right.
that's the price. But they're all saying the same in terms of length.
They are, yes.
So it probably goes down, the other piece of maths is the yearly maintenance cost for the chosen product, whether that
Right.
makes sense. No, thank you.
Yeah, I would just, that was the question I had, Michael, is, you know, obviously, if one of them lasts 2 years longer than the other one, it would be more cost effective to do that. But we can't reuse the infill on the rubber?
No.
So what's the cost of the refill on the rubber? Because the other ones we can reuse the refill.
We can
the
reuse,
infill.
I think it's the permeable aggregates in the Class C estimate. Would that make sense, Glenn? I would have to find out. I'll have to ask Vinny specifically what that line item is for the alternative infill.
Yeah, my
Just give
only
me a-
question is on the renewal 10 years from now.
Right.
How's that all gonna fall?
Right.
I mean, if we have to pay for more infill for the crumb rubber, then,
If it's way cheaper to refill it in 10 years using one of the other two.
But you wouldn't just be refilling it, you would again be replacing the fiber, you'd be doing exactly what we're doing now,
I'm talking about
except the,
EPD and
except the TPE plastic pieces would come out and go back in.
So
So it's
that's not
only
a-
those, it's only that part that you would reuse, not the fiber, not the carpet.
So the infill, synthetic turf and standard infill, he's got as one number, he hasn't split it here in the quote, so.
That's right.
So we can't tell how much we'd be looking at.
I think we can. Didn't you say something in there saying it's the other ones are 20% more expensive than rubber crumb?
I said $35,000 to $38,000.
Didn't I see a 20% number?
That was a contingency.
Okay, sorry, all right. I
Yeah.
thought I was gonna just take 20% of 40 and turn it into 200,000 for the actual cost.
That was a contingency. So yeah, just to be clear, it's only that infill that is reused, not the,
Yeah.
you would still replace the whole field in
Yeah.
10 years, but the little particles would be reused.
Some,
Your worship, can I just raise a
The
question?
ones that were still there.
Sean, I have a question for you. How important is it you get that decision tonight, or if the rest of it gets approved and Bing can start their design work,
Yeah.
what infill you use, that's kind of down the road anyway, isn't it?
Yes, so we
So
could
maybe
move forward
give you
with the
opportunity
design.
to, based on tonight's discussion, follow this up with Vinnie and others, and maybe come back at a later meeting with that specific issue, but for tonight, maybe we can just remove that from the recommendation.
Sure.
Or we can change the last line to just say an inorganic infill product. I think we've decided we don't want to use
Yeah.
the,
organic.
I'd like to
Cork,
support
whatever.
Allison's idea. We just have that last line say, we're going with an
Inorganic
inorganic.
infill
And
product.
let staff figure it out a little bit more.
Okay.
So I'll move the recommendation with that change.
Second,
why couldn't we just leave that last line the same?
because it
'Cause it says
said,
to rubber crumb.
It says
alternative
alternative
rubber
to
crumb.
rubber crumb.
Oh, alternative,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm
Yeah.
reading it the wrong way around. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
so an inorganic infill product, so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
three, not the,
Any further, the only thing I think, John, is if they do come back with some numbers, because we're authorizing them to go ahead and start coming up with some numbers, I'd like to see the numbers not only go in for this application, but what it's gonna cost in the future to redo that field,
Replacement costs.
the replacement costs.
how much difference the other
How
three
much
options
difference, yeah.
would be
It's
10 years
possible.
out.
That's-
It's possible that reusing some of the crumbs would be more expensive.
I think it's gonna be more.
Yeah, because you gotta
It does
watch
have to be cleaned.
Yeah. I don't see that
Yeah.
being
If
cheap.
you don't mind just going to that one little extra step and see if there's any advantage in using the stuff that can be recycled.
Okay.
That'd be my only thought. Any other discussion? Okay, I'll ask a question, all in favor? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Awesome. All right, so the annual water system local advisory committee meeting follow-up. Glenn?
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having me. Based on the bylaws that have been established, there's a requirement that the municipality meet with the local advisory or committees, which are an advisory to the local service areas for the water systems. There's 7 on island, and it has been that meetings generally take place in the fall of each year, and myself, the CFO, Hayre, and Councillor Morse, as the council representative, attended all of those meetings in September and October of 2019. At each meeting, staff provided an overview of the water systems, including water source, annual consumption, rate and billing structure, the 2008 financial results, and the annual report to Vancouver Coastal Health, as well as a question period. The LEC meetings give committee members the opportunity to discuss the items, seek clarification, and provide recommendations to council with respect to each water system. Based on the summary, which I'll go through from each LAC, there was a total of 20 recommendations from the committees for council's consideration. Staff have included comments stated in council's decision council's decision-making process. So now I'll walk through each of the recommendations and offer staff's comments. So Blue Water system was the one that had the most drama in 2019, and they came forward with 2 recommendations, and I will read them verbatim to make sure that you're fully aware of the specific terminology that they use. Recommendation number 1 was that the Blue Water System Local Advisory Committee recommend that council direct staff to review the cost allocation for the road repair work on Windjammer Road at Spyglass Road and consider splitting the cost for remedial work between the Public Works budget and the Blue Water Park Water System Reserve Fund. The dialogue that I can offer there is that there certainly has been a lot of debates among staff and members of the LIC with respect to what caused the leak. And I think I certainly reported to you in the past that the pipe was certainly installed across a ravine in a road embankment that hasn't been well compacted. We don't know a lot about the quality of the material, however. It's possible that there has been some natural creep of that material over time. However, we also know that the water main simply was not installed to industry standards. So we agreed and support cost sharing. We recommend a 50-50 split, only because I don't think any investigation will ever be conclusive, and we probably spend more than the 50% of the repair cost and the replacement cost on trying to do research and still not be conclusive. So our recommendation is we support the notion of splitting, and to be fair, we are recommending a 50-50 split.
How much is that, Glenn?
The repair costs, I don't recall the cost of the repair. Sorry, the emergency repair, and now there's also the replace. If you recall, we did emergency repairs, and where we sought money I think it was $60,000 that we got support to fully replace that one section. Also to relocate the water main on the high side of the road and move it away from the precarious edge. So it's the $60,000 in capital, and plus the repair costs, which I don't have the number off the top of my head.
30 plus we're talking.
30 plus, yeah.
The second recommendation from Blue Water was that the Blue Water Park Water System Local Advisory Committee recommends that council direct staff to advise the chair if an expenditure that is not included in the financial plan is required. So again, we had to take emergency response, as well as we did seek approval for the capital costs to replace that water main. We did not engage the LAC at the time. So they felt, and I'll speak to it more towards the end, but certainly one of the repeated messages from the LICs is improved communication between municipal staff and the LICs. So we support better communication and support that recommendation. From Bowen Bay, there were also two recommendations. The first being that the LAC recommends that council direct staff to consider inclusion of well monitoring equipment for the Bowen Bay water system in the 2020 budget process, which is another recommendation that we also agree with, going back to the water investigation. Blue Water, Bowen Bay, and King Edward Bay are all a linked water system that have some interdependency. And right now, King Edward Bay is the only one that has information about the aquifer. And Bowen Bay also would like to better understand what's happening in their wells. And that's definitely something that we support. The second recommendation was that council direct staff to review the recommendations in the water systems analysis report by Creus Engineering dated May 2017 and make a recommendation on an option to pursue. So in 2017 there was an assessment report done that looked at the capacity and performance of the Bowen Bay system and did make some recommendations for improvement. And my understanding is that since that report was done, just
It's sat on the shelf.
for various reasons, it has sat on the shelf and nothing has come of it. So we certainly support revisiting that report and helping make some recommendations on how to proceed with it. Moving to the Cove Bay water system, there was only a single recommendation from them, and that is that they, apologies here, just gathering myself, so the community, LAC supports the rate increase to meet debt servicing cost requirements. So this goes to the loan that Raj has presented and got approval for. So they agree and support the rate changes required to support that. And secondly, they recommend that staff investigate options for placing greater emphasis on the variable rate to meet debt servicing, increased costs, and support conservation. So again, this goes to some earlier conversations we've had about perhaps looking at alternative rate structures to try to curb people, provide some incentives to curb habit. Right now, the structure doesn't promote that at all. Moving to the Eagle Cliff water system, there was actually 7 recommendations that came from them. The first is that they recommend that council direct staff to develop a comprehensive written operations manual for the Eagle Cliff water system, the contents of which include but are not limited to unless you want me to read them out, I was gonna skip all of them. Do you-
Because if you look at the recommendation, it says considering the content suggested
Yeah,
by the
so
local, yeah.
in the end, the reason I am, unless you want to hear them, I was gonna skip them is because I think, while I respect and support all the individual components, my recommendation is that simply that council direct staff to develop a comprehensive written operations manual for the Eagle Cliff water system with consideration for the content suggested by the LAC. The second recommendation was that council direct staff to investigate more up-to-date technologies related to household meter readings. And it's a recommendation that had already been acted upon by staff prior to this LAC meeting, so we certainly agree with it. And that investigation has largely been complete, actually. A memo has been created. It hasn't been distributed at this point, but it is a report that's an available attachment to the 2020 budget process. The third recommendation was that council direct staff to devise the optimal cost-effective solution to be able to report annually the integrity of the main underground water line from the reservoir to the water treatment shed. So Eagle Cliff, if you recall, Eagle Cliff also was struggling with water supplies through this summer, and was a condition that they hadn't experienced before. There was a lot of question around the cause of that. We have done a number of investigations, but one of which was questioning the integrity of the supply main. There's information and there's monitoring done downstream of the treatment shed, but there's a significant length of pipe between the reservoir and the chlorination shed, of which there is no information. So that's the catalyst for that recommendation, is wanting to better understand whether or not there's leaks within that system. So we certainly agree that that all components of the system should be understood, and the provisions have been included in the 2020 capital plan to look at that. Recommendation number 5 was that council direct staff to develop a priority risk-based capital plan for system improvements. Certainly staff agrees with that as well, and there are components of that being integrated into the current asset management program. Recommendation number 6, whereas the Eagle Cliff water system supplied water to Hood Point with water in January of 2019 when the water lines froze, let it be resolved, therefore be it resolved that Eagle Cliff Water System, LAC, recommend that council direct staff to meter the amount of water transferred to Hood Point, and that the Hood Point water system is responsible for covering the costs. Staff do recommend the following resolution, that council direct staff to investigate the cost of installing a meter that will measure the amount of water flowing in both directions between Hood Point and Eagle Cliff water systems. And recommendation number 7, still sticking with Eagle Cliff. Whereas in June 2018, Prius Engineering Limited conducted a water system analysis for the Eagle Cliff water system. Therefore, it be resolved that the Eagle Cliff water system, LAC, recommend that council direct staff to advise the LAC of the status of this report. Similar situation, whereas a report has been prepared, but no action from staff has been taken to date. This particular report looked at options for improving capacity and firefighting capabilities, and staff agreed with the recommendation to revisit that and formulate some recommendations to council. Moving on to the Hood Point system, there were 3 recommendations from them. The first one being that council directs staff to review the revisions document, and there is a link to that, and I'll elaborate here in a second, provided in its October 8th, 2019 meeting, which provides historical content to expand on information in the annual operation and water quality report and to include these revisions in future annual reports. So this is just the LAC had a number of comments on better improvement of communication of certain matters within the annual report. They had requested that edits be made to the 2018 report. We acknowledge and support the requests, but rather than go back and amend the 2018 report, we'll take those into consideration and incorporate them into the 2019 report.
So Glenn, looking at this, I think for clarity, so everybody will understand, we should say in future Vancouver Coastal Health annual reports.
Okay?
Because that was the report they were referring to, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. So we just put BCH in front of and.
Okay. Recommendation number 2 from Good Point is that council direct staff to review the Hood Point Household Society Water Licenses Agreement dated May 14th, 2010, provided at its October 8th, 2019 meeting, I think it should say, with local advisory committee members. This particular report, dating back into 2010, there was an agreement when the Household Society was formed. It delegated responsibility for the water licenses and maintenance of the system to the municipality. Perhaps Councillor Morris probably has a better background on this than I in terms of why this agreement wasn't, was it not enacted, Councillor Morris? Or?
This goes back actually to when the Hood Point Improvement District was formed. Each house, each piece of property in Hood Point had a water license at that time. And those water licenses were not transferred to the Improvement District. The Improvement District held those water licenses in trust for each individual household. And so that in-trust arrangement has now been reinstated with the province when they've gone back with the licenses. So this was an agreement in 2010 to sort of how are we going to deal with going forward. And there was a recommendation to go over it and review it with the lawyer, but nothing ever happened. So this is just sort of trying to tuck the ball on the package, I guess, and tidy it up, finish it up. So we've dug out and we have all the old staff reports and the draft agreement and everything. So it's just a matter of dealing with it.
So staff recommend proceeding with that as well. Recommendation number 3 from Good Point was for council to direct staff to ensure that the distribution of costs of the island-wide water systems master plan consider the actual needs and benefits of each water system. So again, the actual conduct of a island-wide water systems master plan, to clarify, island-wide being municipal water systems, is hasn't been brought forward, but will be included in the budget planning process. But should that study be undertaken, we agree that both the cost and the scope and the cost distribution needs to be considered. King Edward Bay had one recommendation, and that was that council direct staff to provide annual reports to the King Edward Bay Water System LAC operating results to include analysis of the cost of water to the Blue Water Park water system. So we agree with sharing more information about water interactions and associated costs between the two water systems. Moving on to Tunstall Bay, there are 4 recommendations. The First being that the local advisory committee recommends that the committee meet at least biannually. Staff agrees that, and again, it was kind of a recurring theme that we heard from each of the LICs, is that they would like to meet more frequently. Staff certainly suggests that the time involved needs to be considered, but that meeting twice a year would probably improve things. We're recommending that we meet once in June. That is when the results of the annual report become available, and we can meet with the LICs at that time to go over the previous year's annual report. We could get advice and help make decisions together to then come back in September or October of each year to talk about an action plan for the following year. The second recommendation was that council direct staff to include a provision for the purchase of a 450 cubic meter or approximately 99,000 gallon water storage tank in the 2020 budget. So storage was something that has been identified not as a mandatory thing, but certainly efficient from current standards. And the Tunstall Bay committee members were quite adamant that they'd like to see that volume increase. So with that, staff agreed, if that's their desire, and a water storage tank has been included in the 2020 budget. The third recommendation was that council direct staff to apply for an infrastructure planning grant from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs to fund the design and planning of a water storage tank. And staff also agreed with that recommendation as well. And the final fourth recommendation from Tunstall Bay is that council direct staff to research funding options to pay for purchase and installation of a new storage tank. And that again too, staff would be happy to look into available sources for that. Certainly no guarantees that it will be available. Financial, resource, and maintenance implications. Several of the recommendations are administrative in nature and would be done in normal course regardless, but certainly some require staff time beyond the normal procedure. Some recommendations require investigation from which new recommendations will form. Several other recommendations require dedicated capital, the costs of which have not yet been determined. Staff have applied rough cost estimates for inclusion into the 2024 capital plan, but each will require further research and seeking final approval from the financial implications and available funding from each LIC reserve also needs an assessment, as does research and formal recommendations, which will occur over the coming couple months here, largely managed through the CFO, Hayre. And then finally, communication strategy. Again, there's a deep desire for improved communications, and we agree in meeting more frequently, and staff will meet and develop an improved strategy and interface with the LIC to come to an agreement on a communication strategy that works for all. The conclusion is that generally staff are in support of the recommendations provided to council, and with council's direction, we will follow up on each recommendation. I was in conversation with Hope in terms of whether the recommendation is to reread all of those, and we agreed that we did not. In general, again, reflecting on my conclusion was that we're generally supportive with the amendments that I have already indicated when I read out each individual recommendation, looking for your direction.
So I guess when I'm thinking, because these are recommendations for council and direct staff, and I think when we had the meeting, these were sort of things we mutually agreed would be something that would either get done normally or needed some special direction. So I'm thinking what I should do is move that recommendations 1 to 20 in the report dated November 25th, 2019 from Glenn Shercom, Director of Engineering, and Roger, Chief Financial Officer, be adopted.
Okay. So,
Before I second this, or somebody seconds it, I have a couple of questions. I would propose a slightly different recommendation. And my question is, the variable rate that's referred to in the Snug Cove group, is that like a water conservation measure, I'm looking at our official community plan here, and they call escalating rate structure, is that the same?
Same thing.
Okay, because a couple of things that I was hoping to see in the recommendations were things like the words conservation, climate change, and actual needs as opposed to, which I think is the term you used, as opposed to meet demand, which you didn't use, which is, so I'm looking, I didn't see the words official community plan. So I just wanted to make you aware that our official community plan is an excellent document that guides the community in making decisions of this type, and I'm looking at Objective 122. Besides in the vision statement, many other places, Objective 122 says to promote water resource conservation strategies and to reduce water demand as much as possible, including the education of the private and public contractors as to water resource conservation protection measures. And policy 287 includes things like use water conservation measures such as metering, escalating rate structures, like the variable ones, rainwater catchment, appropriate reuse and provision of, anyway, lots of, it's a long one, many recommendations in there. So I don't have a problem with Councillor Morse's motion, except that I would like to add, to amend it, to add as guided by the official community plan, including Objective 122.
Yeah, Councillor Fast. Yeah, this report is a summary of the LAC's recommendation to council. You're absolutely right, and this goes to other actions that I think staff have to take. We will act upon these, but it's not the only list, and I think that speaks to the integrated water master plan that I feel is warranted, and that would absolutely look at all those elements and beyond that you're referring to. So hopefully that.
And the escalating rate, water conservation was a conversation at all the LAC meetings. They were all one.
Okay, I just didn't see it in the recommendations, it's fine. Thank you very much.
Maureen?
I had a couple of questions regarding the EcoClub recommendations. Just it's the sixth in the list, to develop a comprehensive written operations manual for the EcoClub water system. Do the other water systems have written operations manuals at this time?
I would not say they have a formal operating procedures manual.
Okay. So perhaps that would be part of the larger work down the road.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the second question related to EcoClub. Just find it here. It's regarding the transfer of water to Hood Point, and the last part that was in their recommendation, which you modified, was that the Hood Point water system is responsible for covering the cost of, it's not clear whether it's the cost of metering or the cost of the water itself. And then,
Probably both.
yeah, well, hold on. So the revised version of that.
Council
That
directs
comes-
staff to investigate the cost of installing a
Can
meter.
you just let, can we let Councillor
Can we
Maureen,
finish
speak.
our own
Looking
points?
for it.
Yeah. So the council directs staff to investigate more up-to-date technologies related to household water meter readings. I see the point in that, but their question had to do with charging for the water when another water district needs it. Was there a reason why the recommendation that came out of, that you're making, doesn't address the cost question?
We're not, we would support a cost structure. We feel that the immediate, or cost recommendation, but we feel that the immediate action and direction from council is to investigate the cost of the components that are required to make that happen.
Okay.
We could then revisit the cost structure separately, but the immediate is to look at the technology and the bits and pieces to collect the data that's required.
Okay. Then in, just find it again. In King Edward Bay, direct staff to provide annual reports of King Edward Bay operating results to include an analysis of the cost of water to the Blue Water Park system. So how is it different there than when you're thinking about Eagle Cliff and Hood Point? Why would the King Edward Bay consider cost and the other not?
Well, in this particular case, there is cost sharing. I think it's a lump sum done between King Edward Bay and Blue Water Park at this time.
It's a formula, I believe we measure the water and then a portion of the cost of producing that water are charged back to Blue Water Park. So they're wanting a disclosure of that calculation, volume of water that was transferred from King Edward Bay to Blue Water Park in this situation, and basically they want us to show them the formula and the amount of water transferred.
Okay, thank you very much. This is an enormous amount of work, and it's very responsive, I think, to the recommendations that the LACs were putting forward. Thank you.
And it'll Rob first and then David.
Yeah, so, and I'm assuming that all these recommendations have been costed out by you, and there's no alarm bells that are going off, with cost sharing on roads and stuff like that. Raj?
Those will come forward in the budget process. I mean, if you recall, in a high-level budget process, as part of the outfall of these recommendations, there were a number of projects proposed in the districts, and the funding reserve levels were nowhere near adequate to be able to follow up on some of those project recommendations. I mean, some of the recommendations are, they require staff time and effort to look through and investigate, which will be challenging as well with 7 different water districts and all of the work required. It will be a major undertaking of staff time.
Because I don't want to pass something that we don't have the money for, or the capability to do so.
David?
Yeah, so my
You
question,
finish?
my question.
Let Rob finish up first.
Yeah, and then just, and there's a bit of dovetailing on Councillor Fast's comment, in the Cove Bay, you know, the structure to promote conservation, I think that's really, really key. And I know when we threw you out to the wolves last year up at the church there, that was one of the big things that came up, was the discrepancy in water usage. And some people are very conservation, and then there's other people that are just flooding the lawns basically. And even with the restrictions, almost no change whatsoever in usage patterns, which shows you how far education will go, not very far probably. So I do want to make sure that we are moving towards the ability to have that structure in place where we can start charging based on usage, especially going down the road. And obviously, some systems are going to need water metering, and that may take a while. The Cove, maybe sooner rather than later. But I'm hoping that that is sort of the general direction that we're all moving in on that front as far as the paying for the water.
So first of all, thank you very much for this. This is a really good report. And as Maureen said, it'll go a long way, I think, to building up some improving some relationships. But the trouble, and I'm not quite sure what we're being asked to do here. There's 20 recommendations, and as we've just heard, some of them are fairly straightforward and routine-ish, most of them aren't, and most of them cost money. So if we're money in some way or another, from staff time to capital, if we are saying the recommendation is to approve all of these 20 things, well, but we can't. And I don't quite get what we're being asked to do here.
I agree. My concern is that I feel like we're signing a blank check here, and
Yeah.
somebody's got to convince me
We're-
that we're not approving expenditures.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let him finish.
The water systems pay for all their own costs, capital and operating. So they're gonna get charged with all the consulting time and everything else to do all this. We're not paying for this out of the municipality generally.
Well, staff does.
And staff time can be charged as well. Because they pay for staff time now to operate the systems. Our financial policies say they will be self-sustaining, pay their own way. So, and if
Do they have the money? Do they have the money?
well, that's part of it. I mean, I think some of the
Could I
things-
direct my question then to Raj to help answer that? Because I mean, Allison's points are good, but
Yeah.
that helps me understand perhaps.
Well, I think as Glenn had mentioned in his report, more recommendations will come out of these recommendations. So, I mean, for example, requests for certain projects.
Yeah.
We're not out blank approving projects. Staff is bringing forward these project requests to council, and then council will have to decide on a strategy or consult the LACs, and then with their input, come back to council. So there'll be further decisions to be made. I don't think any of these recommendations are leading to increased, that they're not financially committing the organization as the way the recommendations are written.
and actually-
I can't see that they're not. They're directing staff to do this, to do that, to do this. If they're willing to pay all the staff time and that sort of thing, that's fine. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars of expenditures in this list. There's no question about that. I mean, that tank itself is probably $100,000 by the time the dust settles on. So I just want to make sure that we're covered on this. They're all worthy recommendations, and they should all happen. There's no question about that. But I just don't know. I just want to be sure that we're not biting off a huge, because there's absolutely no question here that these are direct actions that we have to accomplish.
So maybe, Gary, just by having some slightly different wording
Well,
than
If
staff.
you look at Hope's recommendation, I didn't realize it was a recommendation on a yellow sheet, which is slightly different from what,
Okay,
it's the
so-
council approve the recommendations contained in the annual water system committee follow-up report. There's no timelines on any of these. So staff can come back with a work plan, and some of them will.
But it doesn't say staff come back with a work plan.
No,
It
no,
says staff
no,
do
but
this.
it's directing staff, it doesn't say by when. And two of them, the CREAS reports, may be quite straightforward once the CREAS reports are pulled out, but both of those reports have to do with fire safety in those two water areas. So, there's a lot of stuff in here that needs to be.
I prefer words like something like the council directs staff to something around investigate the feasibility or
Yeah, I agree with David,
Something like
because
that.
I'm looking at
It's too much for me personally.
that tank.
like the 20 recommendations, just to do these 20 things in a year is going to be almost impossible.
And that's a one-year report, that's an annual
Yeah,
report.
so I really appreciate that we've got all these recommendations and they came from the LACs. But we need to, I'd like to proceed with the highest priority ones, and
Well, that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to see
I'd like to.
like the ones that obviously are just, very well technical responses and that sort of thing could be handled fairly quickly, but some of them are pretty, especially when you start putting meters on a whole bunch of, metering all the different.
They're all metered already.
Could we
That's not
ask
what it
for-
says.
Could we ask that staff
Well, I'd like to
investigate
talk to
prior
Hope.
to?
Go to Hope first.
I was just gonna recommend just putting in the council, instead of approve, direct staff to prioritize, and then the rest of the recommendation the same.
I support that. I would move that.
So what are you gonna say, that council
Direct staff to prioritize the recommendations contained in
Nicely
the
done. I support that too.
I don't, it doesn't deal with the budget issue.
No.
If something, what about something like the council directs staff to develop a work plan and budget to implement the recommendations contained in the
Okay, that's nice. Well done.
And can you include the word prioritize in there too?
I
Well,
think
you would do
would
that
be
as
the work
a
plan.
matter of course when you're putting
Yeah.
together a work plan.
Okay.
And I think that's really what we need to see how they all fit
How they fit
together
together, that's
and what some potential
Yeah.
timelines would be and cost. And I don't think this is asking staff to do something terribly onerous, because that would be part of what you would have to be doing anyway in order to organize the staff work. And when I'm thinking about which staff is likely to be doing this, it's going to be, I'm assuming,
Our new engineer.
our new
Oh,
engineer,
yeah.
the director of engineering. And he's going to have to get his head around this. So if his first task, one of his first tasks is developing a work plan and budget, that's a good exercise.
I support that, I like that a lot.
We're yours, right? With all due respect, I think our new engineer will he'll need some continuing help from.
Yes.
from
Yeah.
Brad.
Yes.
There's no question
I agree.
about that.
He'll be a little
Thank
lost in the
goodness.
first month trying to wrap his head around this.
And we don't have Glenn's report on the water master plan either, which a lot of these dovetail into,
Yeah.
and the asset management plan.
But this I think would give us
Yeah.
some comfort.
I think so. Now, Allison, we've got a motion on the table. That
No,
wasn't
it
seconded.
wasn't seconded.
Wasn't seconded, okay.
So can I just didn't catch all those words I didn't.
Okay.
So that council directs staff to develop a work plan and budget for the recommendations, the rest the same?
To implement the recommendations contained in yada
So I'll second that if that's what.
Okay, and I'm going to go to Glenn.
Yeah, I just wanted to express that I think we failed to speak to budget and cost in the report, but it was certainly our intent. When we mentioned incorporation into a budget, that it would then go through the same rigorous process of subject to financing and go through the approval process. So it wasn't our intent to suggest.
No, I certainly understand that, but I don't see that in the recommendation, in the
Yeah.
previous recommendation, that's all.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think this course of action
Yeah.
would probably be a better way to do this. I got a second on that, Rob?
I second it.
Okay, I have a second then.
I support this motion. I think this brings the thinking and the budgeting side into it, and I think it'll help point up or highlight changes in perspective, like one water system asking for a lot more storage versus another one asking for a variable rate for conservation. And so those will be in front of council for future decisions. And that's what I wanted to know. So thank you, I support this motion.
Okay, any further discussion on this?
I'd like to say, listening carefully to all this dialogue, absolutely support what's on the table, because it is the only way to go with these individual fiefdoms, which seem to have little combination or reciprocity of interest amongst themselves. They're scattered all over the island, and each one has its own little area, and some are funded and some are not funded. I support this because I think step one, this is what we're going to have to do. I just hope as council that we're then able to look beyond this to say, when we have resolved the issues as raised by these individual water boards, where are we going to go from here? Really, are we going to continue? Because everything we have ever said or ever done over all the years on water boards has got us precisely to where we are now. And I don't think in the long term that is necessarily the way we want to go. We're going to need some form of vision for water boards on Bowen Island and what their future is or isn't. So let's by all means fix what's bust, because the water is leaking from the pipes, and I think that's the priority. To do anything else is just appalling. So let's do that, and let's have one eye out on what the future might look like when we've brought all these water boards up to a certain standard, where they are indeed funding themselves and where they've got the correct level of reserves. And I doubt whether the levels are reserved are correct right now, but they're hopelessly underfunded in some cases. Let's deal with that, but please
would be great if we could find some future vision for water. Because I don't think we can continue. We've done it for so many years. I think it's run its term. I certainly vote for it now because I think we've got to do it. Let's get on with it, get it done, and profound thanks for doing it. You probably have, with the others, Raj and Alison now, the best possible current knowledge. And if we have our new engineer comes on board, I think your help and assistance is going to be indispensable to that person. There is no way they can just jump on this project and take it single-handedly. I think we are kind of wedded to the hip for a considerable length of time, Mr. Glenn, while we deal with these water problems. Let's not dump it, on the head of some poor new person arriving in our midst trying to do a good executive job. Thank you very much.
I have a huge concern about staff workload too. I mean, this is just, it's really over the top. So, any further discussion? Okay, I'll tell you, ask a question, all in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Glenn.
I know.
You can go home now.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so the business license update. Daniel Martin. Oh, I like that.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me. I'm here today to give you an update on our business license program. We thought, given that we come to the end of the first year, we'd give you an update on our numbers and our thinking and strategy going forward. So I did this in August, but this was our latest numbers as of December 15th. So as of December 15th, we had received 357 applications for business licenses in 2019 in Bowen Island. And at that point, we issued 324, so we still had some outstanding ones, primarily relating to 13 applications that had occupancy or building inspection issues still outstanding. But given that our target at the start of the year was, we were sort of estimating 300 license applications, we were happy that we were well above that. So that brings us to our next thing, which was about enforcement. So throughout 2019, we did not conduct any enforcement of our business license bylaw. We did several rounds of education and awareness. So we had a regular email contact of businesses we were aware of to send them periodic reminders. And our business license inspector did several rounds, most recently in December, of visiting storefronts. So knowing which storefronts haven't had it yet applied and having that information and bringing application forms and being as proactive as possible to encourage people and alert people that this was now a requirement. But having said that, sort of in fairness almost to the people who applied in 2019 have been paying their licenses, have already, some have already paid for 2020. We wanted to have a system in place where we actually start the enforcement of business license bylaw. So what we've proposed in the report is that beginning in early 2020, for businesses that have been contacted throughout 2019 and that we observed are operating in 2020 and haven't applied, that we would follow a step in terms of a warning letter sent initially to give people 2 weeks to submit an application and then start to look at writing fines under our bylaw notice enforcement bylaw. So the first offense fine is a $25 fine. So it's sort of a warning with a little bit of teeth to it, but it's sort of that initial shock and progressing that way through the period, obviously looking for those businesses to submit applications. So that was the first piece that I wanted to talk to you about, and then the next move on. Next, we should flag 2 potential amendments to our business license bylaw as well. So the first one, section 8 of the business license bylaw, is supposed to give an option for businesses that apply over halfway through the year. So it's reduced by 1/2. What we found is we had a couple people in 2019 who had been operating but didn't actually apply until September and have their license issued. They said, well, I should only have to pay half the amount because it says it's reduced by half if it's issued after July 31st. We said, well, I guess that is how it's written, so like an amendment to amend it to say, okay, it's if you open over half the year, right? It's not just if you don't bother to apply. And the second one we found is the sort of office of issue. So for a couple different professions, if you're, I think in the report I said, like real estate agent or your massage therapist, it can be that the office itself is a business, but each person operating there is a business as well. So currently we say, well, they all need to apply for business licenses, but we found some communities will have a category, and they'll say if you're a professional office of some kind, and there'll be a fee that's higher than just for one license, but it doesn't mean every single person would have to get a license on their own as well. And so those are the two recommendations that we bring forward. So to begin enforcement of the business license bylaw and to prepare amendments to the business license bylaw as outlined in the staff report. And just for that second piece, we'd be looking to bring amendments. We're looking for developing amendments for short-term rental bylaw changes, and we would just incorporate those amendments into this new bylaw.
Perfect. Thank you, Daniel. Questions?
So maybe I'm misreading Daniel's report. Everything you said, you didn't mention the kennels.
I did, so that one came in September.
Okay.
We've had direction to amend to kennels.
Okay.
And our new planner has been working on a kennel bylaw as well, so that's sort of an ongoing piece that we haven't resolved at this point.
Daniel, how many business licenses have been given out to occupations, businesses that are coming offshore?
I don't have that number in front of me. I'm sure I can find it. I can pass it by emails, but I would imagine in terms of if we're looking at categories of businesses operating without business licenses, there's some there's some probably home businesses, and the largest number of people who are operating without it is probably off-island businesses.
So why aren't I'd much rather encourage that we go after the people that are doing business off island. I mean, we have to, obviously, we have to enforce this, there's no question. But I'd like to see us getting the off island businesses. I don't know, what are we doing to do that? Are we on the ferries? Are we on the work sites?
So our business inspector does visit work sites. And we do the information app that we're giving to with building permits. And I think those are the two main, that's the main category. Like the harder to catch ones are the businesses that come over that aren't related to building per se. Yeah, because in a sense it's trying to capture it through like a contractor or general contractor knowing that they're listing licenses for subcontractors.
Yeah, I think we're being very aggressive with the on-island businesses, but we're not being as aggressive with the off-island businesses. That's just a thought that I have, which I'd like to see change. And if you have to go around on the ferries and just walk around the ferry when people are going, in the morning, that's usually the 8 o'clock ferry. Otherwise it's all good. Maureen?
The penalties still seem very low to me. I don't get about $150, and that's after multiple notifications. Has there been any thought to increasing the penalties, or do you want to see how this works out?
I kind of want to see how it works out. I mean, you're right in that they're focused more on like somebody who has a storefront and is operating on a business license, because the bylaw has the provision to do it per day. So in theory, if we got to the further offense, the 125, it's like in theory, they could get a new notice every day, which is like what some municipalities did when they were trying to crack down on the cannabis stores, and it was like, every day we're just going to do it. But off-island ones, it's harder because then it's like, well, you have to see that, okay, they're actually operating on Bowen on this day and on this day and on this day.
So.
Thank you for the report. I remember when we talked about it that we were treating enforcement more as compliance and helping ease people into this new system that we were introducing on Bowen, and being concerned about the small businesses for which hadn't even heard about it because they do marginal little bits of business, but it's still part of their living on the island. Anyway, I know we thought about it and carefully earlier, and I'm in support of that. Seeing as how we have been without business licenses all this time, I like to take the time to wind them into Bowen community life in a in the way that we've thought about gently, and so that everybody has a chance to learn about them. It seems to me that's the education part of it, and so I'm in support of these motions. If we need, you don't need us to make them, right? Because we already made these before, or did we?
So I'm looking for these. Yeah.
Oh, okay, then I'll be happy to move these motions.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? I would just add on to that, I mean, one of the reasons we brought in the business license was for statistics and, for economic development and all the rest of it. And if we're not picking up all the people that are coming onto the island, then we're not getting a very good review of the actual situation on the island. Okay, any further discussion? I'll ask a question, all in favor? Thank you. Unanimous. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. 357, one per day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, you're still here then.
I know,
Development
it's very
variance
different.
permit. Yeah.
So my next report is on a development variance permit, number 15, 2019, for the Sand Cove House Society. This is located on Miller. So this is, for Orange South, this is Miller Road, just past the Four Corners, and just below Bowen Court. And so they are in terms of zoning, they're in area 2 of CD15. So this zone permits up to 24 units of supportive housing, with a maximum lot coverage of 55%, a maximum height of the lesser of 14 meters or 3 stories, and it has setbacks of 4 meters from the front line and 3 meters from the side and the rear lot lines. So Sand Cove House is proposing a building that would have 22 one-bedroom units, with a total of 2,400 square meters of floor area and just over 9,000 square feet or 842 square meters of lot coverage. All right, so they're asking to allow this development to go forward, they're asking for a number of variances. The most significant one, I would say, is the increase in lot coverage, so from 55% to 65%. This is about a 1,500 square foot increase in the lot coverage on the ground. They're asking for an increase in the height, not to the overall height of the building, but to allow a partial 4th story, so they're under that 14-meter height limit, but to have that 4th story. They're asking to reduce their side setback, so the first one here is to reduce it along the north side of the building for the underground arcades. This will be entirely underground, which will extend into the north setback. Asking to extend the roof overhang, so we allow roof overhangs to go 0.9 meters into the setback, and they're looking to extend that to 1.25 meters on the gable roofs to a full extent over the balconies. Asking to reduce the side setbacks for architectural columns on the side of the building and the elevator shaft itself. And they're asking to reduce the front setback as well for the masonry arch above the parking system building entrance. And so this is a little hard to pick up here, but essentially the building itself is within the setbacks, and the little red bits are the roof overhang, and the columns will extend into the setbacks, and the parking on this north side of the building will extend into the setbacks. So in your package, you'll see we've received 8 letters of support, largely citing the need for housing for seniors across Bowen Island, and we received letters from the Bowen Island Co-op, but as well as people from across the island. We received concerns from the owners of Lot 12. So let me just go back. Lot 12 is this lot, this duplex lot that's located really adjacent to it. And they had a number of concerns that I met with them most recently on Friday, so this is sort of just pushing forward, but they had suggested 4 different things that they suggested Sand Cove House could do to mitigate the concerns of the variance. So they suggested locating the building itself further north, so it'd be further from their lot line. They suggested planting of trees between the building and their property line. They suggested a fence and the overhead walkway be screened and then cut from this. But finally, they asked for a deferral of the variance at this meeting, so they have more time to talk to the proponents and the proponents' architects about changes. So then I met with Sand Cove House Friday afternoon to go over it, and Sand Cove House sort of answered those 4. So they said, well, shifting the building further north would be quite a large cost to their project. If it goes closer to the lot line, it'd end up needing to reduce window openings and balconies along that side. So it'd be much less livable a building. They thought that design could place the whole project at risk. The second one being the trees. They were concerned that essentially the soil is bedrock at that part. So planting trees probably won't survive without significant groundwork, so either building up the soil, digging down for the soil. We talked at length to them about the fencing or landscaping between the buildings, and we discussed feasibility of it and how it would work, and basically said at this point they're not willing to commit to one solution to address that number 3. They said they do intend to screen along 112 as part of their landscaping plans, but they haven't fully developed those at this point. So they were perfectly willing to commit to broad screening on the overhead walkway in the back of the building. So based on that, I've amended the permit that's before you to include that screening as a walkway. I proposed a condition that could be placed on the permit that would relate to the fencing, so it would say either fencing or landscape barrier between the buildings that council could direct us to include in the permit before issuing a permit. I suggest before council may wish to just defer consideration of this application. So the applicant would like to have the permit today, but if council thinks it would be better to take a couple weeks for the applicant and the neighbors to sort of see if they can figure out solutions to the problems, council may want to defer this until the January 27th council meeting. But following that, the staff recommendation would be to issue the variance permit.
David?
So, thanks, Daniel. So I, looking at the responses from folks, obviously everybody really wants us to move forward. But the correspondence from the folks in Lot 12 I thought was very logical and very respectful in their approach. And so I like the words you have, and I'm not sure if this is on page 4 of 6 in your report, where you say that a visual barrier be constructed along the upper portion. Is that what you said you already put in, or no?
That I did not put in, so that I had worked on including, but hadn't put in. So that would be if council wants that, I would just look for a motion that council directs that to amend DDP 15/2019 to include the
All right,
condition.
that would be my recommendation, that you include the wording on page, where everyone can see it, 4 of 6. That a visual barrier be constructed along the upper portion of the shared property with Lot 12. This barrier to be in the form of either a fence of no less than 2.4 meters in height or a landscaping barrier to provide sufficient visual barrier to a height of 2 meters be constructed along the property boundary shared with Lot 12. That seems like a reasonable approach to me to address the issues that they were raising.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Allison?
Well, I guess I'm just sort of looking
there it
at
is.
the letter and the correspondence and looking at, so they're asking for, is it 1,500 square feet we figured of extra space? So it almost looks like they just said, okay, here's the lot lines, here's the setbacks, here's what we're going to build. Did they even ever do any drawings to show what the site would look like or what the building would look like with 22 units, but with the right lot coverage?
I don't know. So my first meeting with the architect was with a building that was designed. Basically.
That was already done,
Yeah.
and so what they've done is said, it looks to me like, here's the lot, let's maximize it. And if you look at some of their sales material, I'm not sure, the people that bought that lot, if they were expecting something slightly different in the building. And so to defer for 2 weeks, to give them time to, or for us to ask, what if we didn't grant you the square footage variance? What would you do? Where, would they make the building smaller in that end, which would improve their, the visibility is not the right word, ambiance or,
Sight levels.
well, not even sight lines, just the sort of nobody's staring in my windows all the time feeling. I mean, we went to great lengths with detached secondary suites, saying, they can't be sited somewhere where somebody else can look down and top of another house and from the suite above the garage and stuff like that. Yet, so I don't know whether the two architects could work together to figure something out, or did they just try and maximize what was there? I mean, what would happen if they didn't get the square footage increase?
Okay, so all first.
I think there's been a ton of work gone into this over the years by the charity that are planning this well, needed structure for Bowen Island. And I remember asking the question about parking when Daniel presented the last time. Did they need all those parking spaces? And the answer was it had been very carefully thought out about who would want to come and live there and what would, to fill the building, they need this many square feet of parking. I'm sure they've thought about all this from the detail that was presented by our staff just in terms of parking. And so I'm quite willing to support this project with the addition of the recommendation that you've made. I think it's good. I'd like to issue.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Recognizing the support of this, I have to tell you, I am more than sympathetic with the people who wrote from Lot 12. When they bought that property, you know, the situation adjacent to it was as it was at the time, and this is a variance. And if you went back and you put the diagram, you don't have to do it showing the building there with the front where the restaurant isn't going back. It's looking at a building in isolation. But if you were to superimpose onto the drawing the house next door, or the properties that will be built and have been bought and paid for next door, you will see that that walkway looks right down onto their homes. And I actually found the response from Snug Cove House, frankly, less than inspiring, because people have gone, rightly, to great lengths to support Snug Cove House and to give them what they need so they can proceed, because it's a project we agree in. And yet Snug Cove House, when they're faced with this very reasonable concern from a neighbour, talk about lack of soil. Well, there was soil there before they removed it. I actually found the response something of a brush off, to be honest, and did absolutely not do justice to those people on Lot 12. I thought the reply was shallow and almost to say go away. We might put a trellis or something. This building and this walkway is going to look right down on those buildings next door. Now, obviously, we've got to talk about accommodation, and I think, Diane, I'm asking you that if we are to agree, a visual barrier. I'd like to know who these people have got on Lot 12 on their side to make sure that they are being fairly treated in providing this now adjusted building to give them some real privacy. Because a barrier, I mean, you know, what are we talking about here? I would really like to see a little bit more detail on what we're doing to protect the people in Lot 12 before necessarily galloping ahead. If we can put in a lot of good wording so we can move ahead, I probably would buy into that. But looking at the Snug Cove response, I didn't detect any genuine endeavour. Wow, we've just given you a problem and we're going to do our best to solve it. That is not what I read in their reply. In fact, I read to the contrary, as a matter of fact. So I'm not going to rush to vote to proceed with this until I know that those people are going to get fair and equitable treatment. And there is somebody batting for them who's going to make sure this is really going to happen, and not just, they're not just going to end up with some cheap wooden fence or whatever, however you wish to describe it. Let's have it spelled out for these folk a little bit to protect their interests.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Daniel, just for clarification, which are I think these are,
Comments.
the actual building
Those are balconies.
is inside the setback.
Yeah,
Inside
I'll
the
just
setback.
come back to the words bigger. Hang
Yeah, okay.
on. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's better.
so the building itself doesn't go into the setbacks at all. The balconies are what's allowed in our zoning. to
Yeah,
go
this
into
is the
setback.
only obstruction right along here.
And so for the roof, this is for the roof overhang.
Oh,
This
yeah.
part over top goes into the setback, and the columns in here. But so in terms of that, like if the lot coverage variance wasn't received, Central House could design a building that doesn't include this portion of it, or they could design a building that stays at the back and that doesn't go as far towards Miller and fit within the zoning. And I just wanted to say, in terms of in Central House's sort of defense in terms of the language in the report. So I met with the neighbors just before noon on Friday. I met with Snuggle House, I think at 2:30 on Friday, and we had to get the late published report at 3:30. So in terms of their wordsmithing and their response, like their answer there, but in terms of how it comes across, maybe unintentional on my part.
They had 1 hour.
Yeah.
But is there any harm in deferring for 2 weeks and having the architects get together to see if there's some way that some of this can be mitigated?
But the funny thing is, they can build the building right to that line. So you're not gonna change
Well,
anything except for a
Not
1 foot over.
necessarily. If we asked them what they would do if they had to remove 1,500 square feet, they might take it off that end, not that end.
No, but they might take it off that end or the backside or anything. The reality is, they can build this building right to this line. Right to that line. And you can't stop them. I mean, that's the reality of the situation.
But it's 1,500 square feet too big, so.
Yeah, but it
if-
doesn't, they can take it off anywhere.
But they could take it off here, or they could take it off here.
But I don't want to force them to make the building smaller. I'm happy to have the size again. I just want to have, I agree with Michael, I agree, but we need to have a proper arrangement.
Was there not a discussion between the proponents, lot 12, and the Snuckle House people? Didn't they have a discussion?
They haven't met with you.
Come to some kind of resolution? I thought I read something.
I mean, they clearly discussed it.
Yeah.
Off and on. Like I first met with the lot 12 owners before Christmas, when they first got the notice. And I know they talked back and forth with Snuckle House through that period. But obviously haven't reached any resolution. Like I haven't been present in a meeting with the two sides.
Let's change the windows on the house. Morning.
Could you go to the recommendation, the additional condition?
Sure.
I'm prepared to support the variance tonight with the addition of that condition. I'd like added to it that a visual privacy barrier be constructed to just sort of underscore that is the purpose of it. And I agree with Gary. I mean, even if they had built this, if they were to build this with no variance, the owners of lot 12 are going to have issues with privacy regardless. People are going to see into their bedrooms. So at least with the two conditions, the one related to screening of the walkway and this, the visual privacy barrier, they're in a better situation than otherwise. And I think that the email thread that you showed, yes, I had somewhat similar reactions to Michael, but I think the email thread went as far as it could go in terms of coming up with some useful conditions to put into the permit.
How high would that, like, that building's pretty high. Do you have a picture of the building? I don't know how accurate it
That high
is.
and that.
I think I put the elevation in.
There it is, there it is.
Yeah.
So
It's the
this
second
is-
row down.
Yeah, so this is essentially the house on lot 12.
So
We
that's
essentially
the
start here with the carport and go up 1 story and up the 2nd story. So I mean,
Just
yeah,
those two balconies
it's
right
these
there.
two, yeah, these ones and then these ones up here, the ones that sort of overlook the house, they're next to each other.
They're perfectly within their right in the zone to do that, as far as Snuckle is concerned.
I'm in support, and I think the reason for the whole project is the reason that Lot 12 was developed, right? It's all part of the charity turning itself into a developer in order to sell off those lots or raise funds to build this. So and this has been an identified need on the island for a long time, so I'd like to move that council issue development variance permit DVP 15/2009 for the variance of setbacks and lot coverage for 118 Miller Road, legally described as Lot 13, District Lot 490, Group 1, New Westminster District Plan, EPP 77831, PID 030526931, with the addition of the condition listed on page, how would I describe that?
As amended to include the following condition.
Yeah.
That a visual privacy barrier be constructed along the upper portion of the shared property with lot 12.
You need line after your shared property line.
Shared property.
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
probably not.
With lot 12, this barrier to be in the form of either one, a fence of no less than 2.4 meters in height, or landscaping barrier to provide sufficient visual barrier to a height of 2 meters to be constructed along the property barrier shared with lot 12.
I move that.
I'll second that.
Did you say privacy in there?
Yes,
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, it's included.
And nobody's willing to wait 2 weeks to
No.
let them talk, the architects talk to one another?
Do we have the two restrictions in there?
I thought there were 2.
The screening is apparently already in the permit, if I'm remembering correctly.
The walkway screen, yes.
Yes, so it's only the
It's only
addition of
those
this.
two.
That one.
The workways,
Could we add
Walkway screening is already there.
suitable to the owners in lot 12, or is that too much? Because they
They could say,
could deny it.
It's a little, yeah.
Reasonable.
Is there any way they could, without having the right of veto, at least be consulted, so that Snug Cove House said, okay, these people may not have the right to veto, but council has said, you've got to go talk to them? Because I understand the right of veto would just mess things up. But I'd like to put some onus on the people from Snug Cove House to actually go and talk to these people.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're gonna own this, Daniel, but if we had the two of them agree on the,
Yeah.
I
I mean, if you're making my life easier. So this project will need a development permit.
okay,
For the design panel.
For the design panel, which would look at landscaping and stuff, but maybe instead of, if council passes the motion to issue it, maybe something like that, that council directs staff to consult with the owners of lot 12 as to the suitability of a barrier or something like that, something that's just there to say, okay,
yeah,
staff have to determine that it meets the requirement for most of these talks.
because I don't think moving the building is gonna help them at all.
No.
It's gonna be, just like we dealt with up on Kate's Hill there.
Yeah.
It's gonna be the mitigation through the landscaping or fencing, whatever it is. But just so, can we put that in as a friendly amendment, or do you just wanna leave it until the development permit?
I think what Daniel's saying is that if you pass the motion that's on the floor now,
Yeah.
you move a second motion that instructs him to meet with the owners of lot 12, and talk about the barrier.
Okay, any further discussion on the first one?
I
Okay,
would
so just to make it clear, the draft permit that you've already drafted, Daniel, has the screening on the walkway in it.
Yeah,
So what you're adding is what was
Right
on
there.
page 2 of your report.
sorry, page.
Page 4.
Page
Four of the
4.
report.
4 of 6.
And on the screen.
And it's on
And
the
on the screen.
Okay, the visual barrier, but you've added privacy in.
Yeah.
Is that in privacy, yeah,
and our understanding is that we will now do a second
Yes.
motion.
So you
as-
can't put a motion, a third condition in there that the owners of lot 12 be consulted on the design?
Well, that's what we're going to do
We're
with
gonna do
the
it
second.
I mean, I think having it in the permit makes it tricky to say, because the central passers have to show it to them, to say, well, we consulted, or do they have a sign off on it, or where are we positioning here?
So let's get this part out of the way. So is there any further discussion on that we've set it up? Okay, I'm gonna take the vote, all in favor? Okay, that is unanimous, thank you. Now, the wording on the second one?
That council directs staff to consult with the owners of lot 12 regarding the suitability of the privacy barrier.
Yeah, and maybe say in DVP 15/2019 or something, so it's linked, so we know what the motion's about.
Well, if they have to go to the design panel, can you put in that the privacy barriers be looked at specifically by the design panel in consultation with the property owner?
It's just getting complicated.
The design panel isn't usually meet individual property owners.
So I'll move the recommendation that
I'll
we
second
have.
the recommendation.
Okay, can I hear it again, please?
That council directs staff to consult with the owners of lot 12 regarding the suitability of the privacy barrier required in DVP 15/2019.
Perfect. We got a first and second on that?
We did first and
So I
second.
guess my concern is that Dan is going to consult with them, but are you going to go and then consult with Snug Cove House? How are they going to?
I mean, I would say I do in terms of like, when a variance permit, when they've met all their conditions, when we issue them the conditions, then we have to go through and say, yes, you've met,
The council directs staff to consult with owners of lot 12 regarding the suitability of the privacy barrier required in DVP 15/2019.
Could we add in something like the privacy barrier proposed by Stump Cove House and required in DVP, yada yada?
This is,
Because that was,
Yeah.
that means Stump Cove House has to come up with something that the owners can say yes or no.
I move that I support
That change, I think we
that
can
change. I think it makes it much better.
I think if it basically came from Derek, I think he would probably support that as a friendly additional change to the amendment. Or to the
Because I
motion.
agree with Wayne's point.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Okay, any further discussion on this? All in favor? Thank you. Wow. Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Daniel.
You can't go yet.
I know.
Yeah,
Stick away.
You were trying to make a quick
it's
Yeah.
quick.
I think we're moving into correspondence or,
No,
oh,
somebody
No.
pulled period one.
we're gonna do that now? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
You didn't bring us cookies to Friday, so let us.
Okay, 3.7.
Is that what else then?
Which is Maureen's, yeah.
Yeah, so Daniel, it's the housing agreement itself, just something occurred to me in light of the work that we were doing on the business licensing. So it's page 8 of 35 in our PDF, and it's clause 1.01, section Q, rental accommodation means a unit that is made available for rent to a tenant for residential use only. And I don't know if this makes any difference or not, but I was thinking about how many people on Bowen have small home-based businesses. Would this preclude somebody having a home-based business in a rental unit in this project?
I'm just checking the zoning.
Like an artist.
Because I would have said instinctively, I'd say no, that's accessory to that residential use, and we allow home occupation, we say that's a residential use. I'm just trying to check the zone to see, to make sure that we allow home occupation as an accessory use.
Yeah.
Q.
Q?
Q.
Yes, we allow home occupation use as an accessory use. No,
No, I
We
don't
don't.
think we do in multi-use.
yeah,
buildings.
So that could be an issue.
yeah. I mean, but I would say that's more like the zoning. So our zoning in area 1 of lot 2 doesn't allow home occupation use. Very specifically, we've unchecked it, so you can't have a home occupation in that zone. So normally, like I would say, if our zoning allowed home occupation, then I would say, yes, that would be fine, it's a residential use, but having, a computer, a business based out is acceptable as a residential use, same with any like rental accommodation. But in this case, the zoning itself doesn't allow that. And as Allison said, it's totally the case, we don't allow it, like, if we don't allow it, then.
I think it's the multi-use,
Yeah, if you don't allow, we can't allow it traditionally multi-use.
based on the basis of traffic coming and going.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah, but
somebody,
if you could have a home, I mean, I have a home-based business license that I don't have people coming and going.
Right.
It's just my business is there.
Yeah.
You're a writer,
painting
an
other
editor,
pictures.
artist.
Yeah, but if you're running a childcare business or a computer fixing business or something like that, they do have people coming and going.
Piano lessons or whatever.
Anyway, I don't want to stop this housing agreement. I think it's otherwise fine, but I just want to flag that because I think it may be something we want to keep in mind for other projects.
So it may need amending and looking at the definitions of home-based business and for different
Different
categories.
categories or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Something for the strategic plan maybe.
No, there's a parcel of small amendments to the land use bylaw in the works, so possibly included. Anyway, in the meantime, I will move recommendation 3.7, that bylaw number 496 cited as housing agreement bylaw number 4 Plan 6, 2019 be reconsidered and finally adopted. That council directs staff to file notice of bylaw number 496, 2019 on the legal title of Area 1 of Lot 2 if the land is subject to a housing agreement, and the bylaw number 500, 2020 cited as Bowen Island Municipality Area 1 Housing Agreement Authorization Bylaw number 453, 2017 repeal Bylaw number 500, 2020 be given a first, second, and third reading. So moved.
Okay, Allison, second, and any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, unanimous. All right, and 3.8, Sue Ellen?
Oh, sure, okay, this one,
Thank you,
I just,
Daniel. See ya.
this one has, this is about the ATVs building
Yeah.
trails on Mount Gardner. We also received another letter about that.
Yes.
12 point, oh, I can't,
Hold on.
shoot, I can't find it, okay. And it's from Anne Shalot and Andre. Anyway, I would going to suggest that this is has been an ongoing issue over the years. At one point, within the last 10 years anyway, it was proposed that there be a whole lot of mountain bike trails built on Mount Gardner in order to encourage off-island mountain bikes to come. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's the one. It's a letter in our package to Tom Blackbird of BC Crown Lands, and it's related to the same issue. So seeing this and having had people in the community contact me as well, I would like to propose that rather than just receive this for information, that we refer it to staff or to the Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee. Because this is the proposal for an ATV and dirt bike trail on Mount Gardner, at the top of Mount Gardner. And there are community concerns out there. A similar kind of proposal has been referred in the past to the equivalent of the Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee, and there's a whole bunch of recommendations already there. And or we can just refer it to staff. But I just don't know about leaving it here just to receive the letter.
Well, we gotta see where it's gonna go for it.
My preference is not to refer this to a committee. I would prefer that a letter came from council simply asking for some clarification from Tom Blackbird. You know, what is the status of this project? Because there are a number of points in Anne's letter that, for instance, as demanded by the utility company servicing the infrastructure, I don't know if that's actually true. You know, that the utility companies have put forward, you know, a request. So I'd like to hear from Glenroe.
I don't think anything's gonna happen with this, to tell you the truth. It's a non-starter, and I don't think that,
Nonetheless, I think it would be.
it's not gonna happen without us getting a chance to talk about it. Let's put it that way.
I think we should
It hasn't
send a
been,
letter and say what's going on.
was it sent to us?
Gary?
No,
I
it wasn't
guess,
sent to us.
if I'm understanding correctly what's happened, but I haven't gone and actually looked at it in the last couple of weeks, the off-road ATV, or I can't remember the society's name.
Trail riders.
Trail riders, they are surveying their members to see if they're interested. So if,
Actually, they're surveying the broader community.
but they've asked their members to pass it out to the broader community. So if people that think it's a horrible idea answer their survey and tell them it's a horrible idea, but once their survey results are in, then I guess the next step. So I don't think we should refer it to committees at this point, or even necessarily write a letter to province, other than maybe just ask staff.
I don't think it was sent to us, so I don't know why we should have anything.
Well, we haven't said the survey, but at some point, the survey results are gonna come in, and then, I guess, what do they intend to do? But clarify some of these other points that have been raised with a phone call to Glenroe or something. I
Somebody
don't,
wants
or
to
just
do
clarify
that.
what the process is. I mean, because it's on Crown land, would we be consulted if they were wanting to go ahead with it?
Well, I think we didn't see.
I would like to just, to keep things simple and quick, that council received the letter from Neil Boyd and Isabel Otter, and the letter from, in the information, I still don't know the number, sorry.
12.11.
Thank you, 12.11, in the agenda, regarding a proposal for an ATV and dirt bike trail on Mount Gardner dated December 26th. Well, whatever, you can sort that out, and refer this to staff.
For
So the-
follow-up with Flynn Road?
For follow-up with Flynn Road, to answer council's question, something like that.
Yeah.
Because I know Bonnie is aware of it, but she didn't have a lot of information. It started coming out over the Christmas break. She might need council's direction to spend time on something like this. It has been a big issue in the past when it comes to logging, or when it comes to other proposals for Crown land over the years. Council has spent money on Crown lands reports because they're so significant, our Crown lands, in terms of our water towers and our clean drinking supplies, which can be, erosion by different kinds of bikes and things unless they're well planned. And so anyway, that's I move that it be referred to staff.
Sorry, just a clarification. So I was away when all this was happening. So did this group that Alison can't remember the name of, and neither can I, actually send a letter to the province asking for this to happen?
No, they're surveying their members.
They're just
You're
serving.
just serving a member?
Yeah.
Bonnie, go ahead, step on. You're gonna be on soon.
You're on next anyhow.
The group that we're referring to is the One Island Trail Society, which is a coalition between 3 groups on island, which is the trail riders,
Right.
the trail runners, and the horse people,
Yeah.
Bylaw. So, as far as I know, that they are in constant dialogue with the province, and they have put the survey out that was talked about earlier.
I'm sorry,
And
did you say as far as you know they have?
They have put out a survey.
But
that
to the
is going
province,
out.
anything to?
They're in constant dialogue with the province. They have an agreement with the province to maintain trails on Mount Gardner as a collective group. So they're in, I believe, contact with the province a lot. I don't know the status of this particular trail proposal or the use of ATVs to the top. And I think that the survey was trying to gain some more information about how the public, the general public felt
So
about
in
it.
that case, I support the recommendation because we need staff to be
We
kept
don't
up
even
to
know
date.
the
I guess I'd also like to
municipality.
give my, I'm not sure what everybody else thinks on council, but there's hardly anything I can imagine that I would,
One
less
less.
like, yeah, I certainly am opposed to this, for all sorts of reasons. But I'm not sure whatever, just so that you know, that's all.
And just one, I mean, for me, the number one, I can't even operate a chainsaw in the summer in the woods, so I can imagine I'm a motorbiker, those engines are hot as hell, I can't imagine. But there was on Facebook, there was a thing, oh, the Bowen Island Fire Department supports this proposal, and I'm like, where did that come from? So I just want to make sure that that kind of misinformation also doesn't go into this project. I don't know what we can do about it, but, it's something we haven't discussed at all. I think.
Well, maybe what we're wanting is clarification of the status.
Yeah. I think that's
Well,
good.
I think it's
What?
clarification of the status and will council be consulted?
That's the
I think
number
that's, because there's all kinds of issues, the noise, the visitor experience, the impacts in the future on our multi-use pathway and our trails. There's erosion, the erosion of the peace and quiet that people come here for, the sort of business asset side of it, the wildfire risk that you're referring to, the damage to creeks, all of those.
Bonnie, can you write a letter to Flynn Road or something and say we're very concerned about this?
I should.
Yeah.
Or a phone number or something and say, we want some consultation before this all goes down.
Yeah, I can ask them questions.
Yeah.
Ask the questions that were just raised
Thank you.
and just get the status,
Great.
where we're at.
Yeah. Okay, so we didn't get a second for that.
I just have an amended motion.
Okay, good.
The council received the letters from Neil Boyd and Isabel Otter and Andre Shalot and Anne-Frank de Ferrier regarding the proposal for an ATV and dirt bike trail on Mount Gardner included in the January 13th agenda package, and that a letter be sent under the mayor's signature to John Blackbird from Flynn Road requesting information on the proposed project and its status.
No, we want to refer it to staff to make the
I'm gonna send
inquiry.
it to Bonnie.
The staff sent a letter?
It was staff making
Big phone call.
inquiries, and then that's when they was like, phone follow up with a letter or whatever.
But
That'd be
also,
good. I'm happy with that. I still
we
move it.
also had in there someone saying, express concern.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's
Express concern.
not a letter, it's not a question to Flynn, we'll say, hey, what's going on? Okay, thanks a lot.
It's expressing concern about the proposal.
Expressing concern and requesting information on the proposed project and its status.
What about just simple follow-up, which means find out what's going on?
Because we want to express concern.
Well,
I
if we're
move
wanting
that.
to express concern, I think that has to be a totally different motion, and we have to let the trails riders, people come and present their case. That's democracy.
Um,
Well, we don't know.
But I wanted to, yeah, as long as Bonnie gets it and she can just sort of follow up on it, that's all I'm concerned about. So
I'll second the motion.
Yes.
okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you.
Then Bonnie, you'll be, once you've done all that, you'll circle back and let council know what it is.
Absolutely.
Councilor Morse, were you opposed?
Well, I don't know what the motion was.
Did you want me to read?
Yeah,
The council received the letters from Neil Boyd and Isabel Otter.
skip through that part.
The council directs staff to make an inquiry to Tom Blackbird at Flynn Road, expressing concern and requesting information on the proposed project and its status.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'll go along with it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, thanks, Bonnie.
However, I think we have to, in all fairness,
No, I
we are
agree with that.
probably, people in their shoes.
It's actually on crown land, so we might not have too much to do with it. Okay, so under correspondence 8.1, and that's over to you, Bonnie.
Sure.
Thank you.
I feel further back today, and I have a cold, so I'll try to speak up.
Well, that's a good thing, then, yeah.
So, I just, we had correspondence, our council received correspondence from Brent McGee of Bowen Island Sea Kayaking, which I'll call this.
Brent
sorry,
O'Malley?
Sorry, this is Brent McGee, Brent O'Malley,
It's another Irish.
owner and operator of Bowen Island Sea Kayaking, and I'll refer to the company as BISC just for brevity. So at the May 8th, 2017 meeting, council passed resolution 17170, which stated that BISC could store kayak equipment on Bowen Island Municipality's road allowance adjacent, it's the road allowance adjacent to Sandy Beach, from June till September in order to run kayaking programs off Sandy Beach. And so with respect to the original council direction, staff issued seasonal permits in 2017 and 2019. No permit was obtained by BISC in 2018, but their kayak equipment occupied this area. The 2019 permit expired on September 15th of 2019. So on December 11th, 2019, a BYLAWS service officer contacted BISC to request that the kayak equipment be removed. And on December 13th, council received correspondence from Brent O'Malley, owner of BISC. So and subsequent to that, I called Brent and asked if he could come in and chat with Kevin Toews, Superintendent of Public Works, and myself, just to discuss our concerns and our stance on the matter. So Brent complied and he came in and chatted with us. And during the meeting, the owner expressed that he did not want to move his equipment, but he would comply if council deemed its removal necessary. Instead, the owner of BISC is seeking to keep his equipment on public road right-of-way and is willing to pay additional permit fees to do so. So a little bit of a discussion. Issuing permits to occupy municipal road right-of-way on a temporary basis is provided for in BIM's traffic and use of streets bylaw. And in addition to BISC, two other organizations utilize the opportunity to temporarily occupy municipal road right-of-way, and that's at Tunstall Beach. The two other organizations have been adhering to the terms and conditions of their seasonal permits. At the end of this, coming up soon actually in February, we're scheduling a cleanup of Sandy Beach. And so where the racks are currently located could be problematic as they want to pressure wash the two community use racks that are there and maneuver some of the fairly large self-propelled watercraft that are currently in that location. We have to drive the truck down and we remove those that are not actively being used for recreation and those that are not seaworthy any longer. So it's kind of a big production. So that's being scheduled and it's been advertised to happen early in February. So Public Works, Kevin Taves did comment as well, and basically he concurs that he states that groups have been issued similar permits to temporarily store their craft as they run their programs, and that they are adhering to all terms and conditions, and they take their equipment away when the permit expires each year. The permission granted to occupy a municipal right-of-way does not vest any right, title, or interest whatsoever in the lands upon which the permit works are constructed. If this wishes to apply, this is coming from Public Works, wishes to apply for permanent structures in the road right-of-way, a registered easement would be required. So that leads us to the recommendation that's in the package tonight, and that's that council requests BISC to remove its equipment from the municipal right-of-way located at Sandy Beach by February 2nd. Brent is back from Mexico near the end of January, and that council request that BISC apply for an annual permit for seasonal use of the road right-of-way for kayak storage during the summer months.
A couple of questions, Bonnie. Is he using those kayaks during the winter? Okay. Second question, how big a deal is it for him to move? Can he lift it out of the way, or can?
I don't know, Gary. I don't think it's, I mean, you know, the kayaks, there's a number of them, and there's the racks. So I know that I think it takes two people to set it up.
Yeah.
And so it would be breaking it down and moving. I mean, it's,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So it's the kayaks and the raft.
And the rack and signage as well.
And when you say storage during the summer months, I mean, I would think that kayaking around here would probably be quite usable from April to the end of
6
October.
months.
So why does it have to be,
Yeah, we've just, I guess we.
and why can't he have it year-round that, right, use of it?
Yeah. So just in my experience, so, you know, at Public Works did address sort of permanent installations as maybe requiring some other form of agreement. The intent of the Occupy permit, it has been to this point, generally it is for temporary use of our land. It hasn't really been for permanent occupation of a road allowance unless there's some other mechanism in place, another legal, yeah. So, and just, I just wanted to, just because I've been doing this job for a little while, and what I've seen, and I'm not saying that this would happen, but what I have observed is that when we give public space up to a certain group for, you know, valuable use, the longer that someone is left in place, sort of the harder it is and the amount of staff time to then try and reclaim that public land. I've spent a lot of staff time trying to do so when the municipality needed to utilize some lands in the past. And it was exhausting.
Yeah, it just
Hours
becomes
and hours
normalized.
of work,
Yeah.
hours of work.
So I have one more question, and that was
Okay.
the public storage racks that are down there. Are the people allowed to leave their kayaks there all year round?
They are allowed to if they're marked and if they're, you know, seaworthy.
No, I mean, they can leave them there
They
all
can,
months of
yeah.
the year.
As long as they comply with the rules.
Percy did.
So I appreciate everything you're saying here, Brian, but I'm sympathetic to Mr. O'Malley. Like, I'm not sure where he would take all these kayaks and store them. I mean, the business is a really important one for Bowen. I mean, as we all know, running businesses on Bowen is a threadbare sort of thing to do at the best of times. And this is sort of, you could call it a bit of a core business in the sense that it brings people here to do stuff that they could then go, you know, spend and help other businesses. I think it's a really important business, and I know I'm looking at the picture, I can see all the local folks who have their, you know, their kayaks and rowboats and stuff like that, just sitting right there in the racks, and And at our beach at King Edward Way, we've got the same thing. We've got our, you know, our racks and they're all labeled and stuff like that, and that's great. And Bonnie helped us get that properly organized, which is good. But I'd sure like to make life easier rather than harder for the business. And I also agree with the point that was made a little bit earlier about how long the season could be for a kayak operator here. So I'm sympathetic to Mr. O'Malley. I'm wondering if there's some other way that we can accommodate him so he doesn't have to be taking it all away, putting it back, and trying to find the right time to start when you might want to start earlier because suddenly it's sunny and nice.
So sorry, which one is he in this picture?
On the left.
The one on the left,
The taller one.
the taller one.
As I say, with the pressure washing, like we want to clean up the racks, they've been, they
Yeah.
weren't cleaned last year, so we'll be pressure washing and to remove some of the boats that are there that are not seaworthy, and longer we do a cleanup, and then we take them all up to Salal, and then we do a mass sort of breaking up of old decrepit boats. So it's a big cleanup. We do it at the 3 beaches where we have the community use boat racks. So to maneuver in that area could be a little bit tricky. I'm not saying we couldn't do it, we could. Brent did too, and when we discussed, he did say that maybe his season did extend a little bit longer, so maybe for his shoulder season, maybe, you know, the permit, just suggestion maybe could be from, you know, talking with him, maybe April 30th till October 15th or October, depending on what sort of weather he sometimes does run into the fall.
I guess the other point is, without hearing from Mr. O'Malley, since he's away right now, I don't know if he's got another place to store this stuff and what the, you know, how hard it is. I'd like to know the answer to Gary's question right off the top.
Maureen?
You mentioned in your report that there are 2 other organizations on island who have agreements that are similar to the one that Brent had, and that those other organizations were complying with the terms of their permit. Which other organizations? Is it Learn to Sail and?
Yeah, it's Isabel Yacht Club and it's Camp Bowen.
And Camp Bowen. So there are 2 organizations that are in compliance. Are those both at Tunstall Bay?
They're both at Tunstall, yes.
They're both at Tunstall Bay. So there may be an equity issue here where they're required to remove. There may also be issues related to their very different sites.
Yeah, I can't remember, where's the ramp for Tunstall Bay?
They use the parking lot, and one of them is, yeah, they use the parking lot area. I don't know where Bowen Yacht Club put their rack last year because I wasn't here, so I'm not sure, but it's all in our road allowance area as far as I know. Yeah.
Road allowance is subject to high waves, and you would remove them for safety.
There's also another difference, which is that the organizations at Tunstall Bay are nonprofit organizations, whereas Bowen Kayaking is a for-profit organization making this public land.
And I just wanted to say that there is signage, like it's a commercial enterprise on public land, so it is setting a bit of a precedent, and this is something that, you know, in my work plan is looking at parks, use of parks and open space bylaw to sort of address these types of issues.
I see this as following up on Maureen a little bit, as a public space versus privatizing with a private business use of that space. And I think when we usually do that, we have things like leases, and where we consider a business to be really important to the island, we might lease the property for a certain amount. And I wonder if that's something he would be interested in. Personally, I think Sandy Beach is small. I am not happy having his sign down there. It's not his property. I just don't like private businesses having signs in a public beach, in a public space where you would think it's for the public. And I think this is also part of the whole big Mannion Bay project of cleaning up Mannion, or restoring the ecological and social balance of Mannion Bay, sustainability, whatever the word is. And where people have, as you might recall, over the past 5 years, there's been a lot of challenges of people using the beach in inappropriate ways, Sand Beach. And I think I see this as a way for the municipality to maintain ownership and public perception of ownership, whether it's, people leaving their private dinghies on the beach so that people can't swim there, people dumping things, having campfires, all these things happen there. And I'm for public spaces for public use. And I also I agree that there needs to be a time when public spaces can be maintained efficiently and easily by staff. What I don't want is staff to be taking and moving the private boat rack. And anyway, I'm in favor of this recommendation, and I'd be happy to move it. Bonnie, did you have something?
Oh, I just wanted to say that sort of use over time. I think that's another reason why we these temporary use permits to occupy our road allowance is because our use and our desire to use our public lands change over time. And so that's why it's been temporary in the past.
Thank you.
Yeah, I sort of.
Yeah, just really quickly, I mean, I'm sort of following a bit on sort of what David's coming at. I have a kayak, I store it in the bush, under a tarp, and sneak it up. And I mean, one of the issues, and it seems at a lot of beaches, is they're not organized and they're just sort of like lying all over the place. And this obviously is a bit more compact in one spot. I can see the issue with having to move all of that every season and rack and even potentially just damaging the beach by having cars try to truck. I can't imagine how heavy that thing would be. It would be quite an operation, I would think, to move that out of there. But I concur with you on the privatization of public land and all that. So I would lean towards supporting this business owner just because I know what he does for the island. He runs around Bowen Island race and whatnot. And I can just see how this would be very cost prohibitive for him to have to pick these up and set them up every single season. And I think would probably actually do more damage to the beach having that coming in and out of there versus just leaving it there for part of the season, for the entire season. But I would like to see maybe some kind of an agreement with him. It sounded like from his letter he's willing to pay for that space. He isn't looking for it for free and whatnot. So, I mean, ideally I would love to see an agreement with him where he does pay a bit for it, but where we can, meet his needs on the rack.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
possible.
it is bound, it's road allowance, so it's bound by bylaw.
Yeah.
So, and there's conditions and there's costs associated with the temporary use permit. So, sort of the guidelines are there. So, yeah, I don't have authority to change the cost that's in there. I'd have to look at the costing structure. And I just want to go back to your point about moving, and this is just for information purposes, is the lasers, the bigger lasers, bigger than kayaks. The Bowen Island Yacht Club, they move those, they get together and they move those every year to the beach and back because of our request to have the space freed up in the winter. So they get together and they move those. It's quite laborious for them to do so. So I just wanted to say that it is done elsewhere, and it's young kids that are helping. They get together, staff helps them to move as well.
I think, and then David, I think we have a contract with him. He's breaking the rules of that contract, and I don't think we can condone that. I think there should be, from what I'm hearing around the table, everybody's in favor of him having a different deal next year, which might involve a lease. And I don't know, can that rack go back further into the woods there or not?
Not in that location, very, very much so, Gary, because there's a bank there, and he has to be able to maneuver the boat around.
Yeah, I think you should move him because we've asked him to move him. That's not the deal he's got there. And if he wants to jeopardize even getting to leave his kayaks there, then I think he should be playing by the rules. But I do also think that we should set up something more permanent for him in the future. Because there's 15 kayaks there. It's not, I know what you're saying about moving lasers, but I don't know. I'll have to get what the
Just add
correct
a
is.
little bit more here about different, like I recognize the yacht club's got all kinds of folks to go down and so on, he's just him. And he bought a business where the kayaks were kept, like, from reading his material, the kayaks were just kept all the time down in Pencil Bay and nobody asked any questions and they stayed there forever.
The rack was there, but the kayaks were moved every year to that
Kayaks were the
location.
rack.
They were, and it
But
was
I-
just, yeah.
And I'd have to ask Mr. O'Malley, I just don't know, but I'm not sure that he has any place he can move them to. Like Tunstall Bay, they can move them,
You have to put the rack on here, in front of the shop.
I guess,
Somewhere else on the,
on the pier, but then, does he have that
Yes.
space on the pier that he can use? I don't know.
This time.
I just don't know, I'm not sure, that's all. Anyway, okay, I'm done.
Mhm. Okay.
I'd like to move the motion as it's written. As we heard, we've got bylaws. That council requests Bowen Island Sea Kayaking BISC to remove its equipment from the municipal road right of way located at Sandy Beach by February 2nd, 2020, and request BISC to apply for an annual permit for seasonal use of the road right of way for kayak storage during the summer months.
I'll second that.
What, just a thought.
Any further discussion?
Yeah. If he was to go through a proper process to be able to keep it there year round and pay properly for it,
Yeah.
would we, because what we could also put forward as a motion is that we direct staff to negotiate with the company for a year, a temporary year lease or, so that he doesn't have to move it every single season in and out of there. And see if we can come up with a lease agreement with him where he does pay a proper sum that we feel is adequate. Because for me, I can see the logistics of having to move that in and out of there. I see that just as, I don't see that being a really smart thing, especially the beach is the quietest in the winter time, the busiest in the summer when it's there anyway. So, and I think that this would be, for somebody like him, could be a real problem for his business. It could, I think the margins there are really thin, but I think it could be, if he does have a proper lease for that for a year round, and we can come up to an agreement with him on that.
I do want to say that there is limited space, so this is the logistics.
Yeah.
There's limited space. We have racks we may need to put in the future. So as I say, year-to-year usage will change depending on community demand. So we have very limited space for another rack if we need to put it in. Already those 2 racks are very full. We do try to clear them out, which we're doing in February, but we may need to use that space to put another community use boat rack in as well. We do have an extra one at the yard right now. So, but that's just saying that's why the seasonal use of the road right of way has, it came up with a lot of staff time and effort to get to this place where we felt secure that we could utilize the space if need be and clean up in the winter. Just as per sort of the status quo of this temporary use, right to occupy or allowance had been sort of temporary. So, but notwithstanding that, there is option to have negotiation to use. I would just caution perhaps on extending it too long.
Yeah.
Because the use does change dramatically over time.
Yeah. But we can still do it year to year on something like that, with not the caveat that you have to move it out every season, move it in every season. So,
Okay, did we get a second on that?
Yeah.
All right, and any further discussion?
so that's the second on him having to move everything out.
As written.
As written.
But Bonnie says she'll talk to him about, or will you?
Only the council directs me.
Okay,
Yeah.
better.
It's the second motion.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna ask the question on the first motion, unless Allison, you got an issue here?
Well, it's February 2nd, he's gonna get back, and I don't know when he's back, but, and probably they need to go back out there in April, it just doesn't make sense to me.
No.
Municipal staff need to use the power washer and clean up the site and all that kind of stuff.
Well, they, I don't know,
I don't know.
I'll let them out the power washer, and get down there quite nicely.
I would have thought. I mean, the time spent, by the time, we were almost into, well, not almost into February, forgive me.
Yeah.
But we're approaching February. It's going to be back in April.
He usually doesn't start running the programs till about May or June.
Do you know, to get the poor guy to do this for this period of time? If we were addressing this in September, October, fair enough, especially as he expressed a willingness to pay. And it's interesting that the motion actually puts, when you actually look at the motion, it talks about remove equipment, and then later on it says apply for an annual permit. Well, in February, yeah, and I like the idea, by the way, of a bylaw talking about public use of space. However, in the interim, I am really rather, in approaching February, I am actually more supportive of the individual. I just think creating necessary work for the small businesses who support our island is just something I have a difficulty with. Really, I just do, for a point of principle, if that's what it is, I think it's a shallow one given the length of time. We can do better than this and get something sorted out. And to Councillor Bass's point, come up with a proper bylaw that refers properly to private use of public space, which I think would be an excellent idea.
I just want to say, because I'm not the superintendent of public works and I don't know the permitting process ins and outs, that the spot that the RAC is occupying is bound by the bylaw. So without understanding the permitting process and all the clauses within the bylaw, I can't say whether or not we can just change what's written. Like, I don't know the wording exactly. So that would be for Public Works to investigate. If we can then extend and have an annual, we would have to go through the permit, the bylaw and the permitting part 2 use of streets, where this comes from. This is where this permit comes from, is the bylaw. So we're talking about a bylaw because it is road allowance. So I think it would be Public Works with myself, but we'd have to see if what is being suggested would need, some sort of amendment or variance to what is written in the bylaw as well. So because it is bound by bylaw.
Yeah, now, he's been warned for a long time. This just didn't happen last week.
So, and I must admit, Gary, because there were staff resources problems.
Yeah.
Well, not problems, there were staff resource shortages while I was gone on my leave. So maybe the communication risk was not the best.
It should have been.
So it was, I think, at the beginning of December that I realized that the rack was still there, and then that's when the bylaw officer contacted Brent.
Yeah, his letter is December 13th, so he just found out in December.
I've got a real problem of condoning behavior, and only because, like Bonnie says, when somebody breaks the rules, then somebody else is going to come right along behind and break the rules. That's what's going to happen. There's absolutely no question about that. I think it's valuable that he has his kayaks down there, as far as his operation is concerned and everything else. But and I don't, maybe we're a little bit culpable because we didn't tell him to get them out in September, October, whatever it happened to be. But the fact remains that he's not allowed to have them there, and I think he should move them, and we'll start a discussion about
I have 2 motions written here. Do we want to go down that road now?
I just want to respond to Gary very briefly, but Gary, he moved it there for a couple of years, and nobody told him to move it, he just had it there, and he thought that's okay, he paid the fee, and he thought he could just keep it there. And then he suddenly found out in, December 13th or whatever the day is, that, he's not supposed to. But he'd had it there for several years and didn't know that he wasn't supposed to.
I did, when we got council direction in 2017, I met with him extensively and said this is a temporary use permit because of all the staff work that had gone into it, and that because the other organizations were adhering to a temporary use situation for road allowance. So I can't speak to if Brent understood that or not, but it was specifically stated that it was a temporary use situation.
what a messy operation.
Have a
I mean, it's just what I said.
It's a motion.
Yeah.
I understand that, and I'm still having a discussion about it, but, does anybody else got anything to say about it? Yeah, I'll ask a question. All in favor?
Did you ask for?
No, I'm not.
You have to.
Huh? Why? Is what I said?
What are we doing now?
No, okay, opposed? So it's opposed. I think, I'd like to have a conversation with him, on his return. I don't think we're gonna get those things moved, but I think there has to be a new agreement. Because I feel, from what the discussion David just had, is
Yes.
we're a little bit culpable because, A, we've let him stay there for 2 years without moving him. Is that correct? Is that correct or not?
Well, yeah, he has, from May 2017 until present, the racks haven't moved.
Right.
But he did seek a new temporary permit in 2019, which now has expired, so he's in contravention of this traffic and uses streets bylaw, because he is, does not have a valid permit. So without a valid permit, he's in contravention of the bylaw. So, as a bylaw officer, unless I'm directed by council, I need to enforce the bylaws.
Okay, so, go ahead, Mo.
I just have a second recommendation based off the discussion.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll just read it and maybe that will help. The council directs staff to negotiate the terms of a temporary use permit for Bowen Sea Kayaking's use of the municipal road right of way at Sandy Beach for the purpose of kayak storage.
I'll move that.
That's now, eh?
Yeah.
We would get him through the next year, and you can set the duration of the temporary use permit.
Yeah, I'd go along with that.
And it would come back to council, so.
Yeah,
But I think that Bonnie's point is that she's working within a regulatory framework
I know.
and simply negotiating the lease would need to be within that.
Well,
The
and it's not
framework of
I
bylaw.
don't know what's provided for in the bylaw.
This
I
would
just
just give you a temporary exemption to the zoning and our bylaws, so
We can't do
it
that.
would just be a temporary.
I'm checking.
Can we defer the discussion of this now that we have ordered him to remove it?
Yeah.
Bonnie can look at the rules and regulations. I think she's got a feeling that we're quite amenable to having him have his kayaks there. And I remember how excited we were about him having his kayaks there because it was gonna give regular users down on the beach and might help with dealing with the problem boat users, owners. So,
So I don't, so just for clarity, as in my with my bylaw enforcement add-on, that I won't be enforcing the terms, I guess that's,
Right.
of the bylaw.
No, but this can come back to council. We'd like you to have a discussion with them about extending,
or
negotiating to get him some kind of a permanent operation there somehow. And if he can't agree to that, then we'll have him removed, but it's not gonna be removed by February. I have a feeling around the table that we wanna give him another chance here, one last chance, and if not, then we'll, have another run at this, the next council meeting.
So, Mr. Mayor, do you want a motion perhaps just to, this matter be deferred, this matter be referred back to staff for discussion with this
Proponent, yes.
and report back to the, probably the first council meeting in February, would that be early? She's back February 2nd, so.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
If that works for everyone, yeah. Okay, both times out of the way.
Do we need a motion for that? I'm happy to move that since I raised the issue.
Yes, I'll second it,
Okay, see what Hope has here.
as I understand it. for that reason.
So that discussion regarding Bowen Sea Kayaking's use of the municipal road right away at Sandy Beach be referred back to staff for discussion with the owner and report back to council. Is that what we're doing?
That's right, and report back to council, and we could put the February date, but you'll report back, that probably isn't necessary. You'll report back as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Move in second. Move in second, further discussion, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Wow, that should have been.
Probably an hour and a half behind schedule.
Yeah, well, you know what, sometimes this happens. Okay, Bonnie.
So this is in regards to the correspondence from the Cates Hill Neighborhood Association. And there is a recommendation before council. And it's to sort of look comprehensively at the events in the cove, the events that are going to be potentially noisy in the cove. So the recommendation before you tonight is that council direct BYLAWS services staff to ensure that proponents of events requiring noise exemptions submit applications in advance of the event so that a noise exemption resolution can be sought from council, and that council direct BYLAWS services staff to include in each noise exemption report a calendar of scheduled summer events occurring in and around the cove, and ask the proponent to provide a noise mitigation plan.
All right. Oh, okay, start with Alice when she goes.
Okay, well, in the first place, right now, if you're gonna be outside the noise bylaw exemption guidelines, you've got to apply for an exemption. But you don't know what's going to be happening, so to say that council direct BYLAWS services staff to ensure that proponents of events requiring, I mean, if somebody's having a party at their house, they're not gonna even think, and Bonnie's not gonna know that somebody's planning a party at their house. So, I think you just say that council direct BYLAWS services staff to encourage proponents of events or to publicize noise exemption requirements, because you can't ensure that proponents require. And then the second one, to include in a noise exemption, in each noise exemption report, so is that the actual application? A calendar of scheduled summer events occurring in and around Snug Cove and a noise mitigation plan?
Yeah, so
I mean, just what do you mean by that?
yeah, so I think it was just sort of, so council would have the full picture, that when BYLAWS services staff brings forward a variance or a noise exemption report, that in that report, there's just a little table of what we know to be occurring in the cove, like the logger sports, the Bowfest parade, like just events or the Bowfest festival.
Baseball.
Yeah, just sort of things that are going to be happening.
So I think for clarification, from what I heard, we want to make sure we're talking about, the events that we're talking about are public events, not if somebody has a house party, backyard barbecue.
Although it could be weddings and those sort of things as
So
well.
it's events on public land?
Yes.
Well, not always, because there's the Union Steamship weddings that seek noise exemptions as well.
Yeah, and you see, your first one isn't even talking about the code. It's talking about anywhere on the island. Can we refer this back to staff to refine the resolution?
Given the lateness there, well, that might be a good idea.
Well, yeah, there's no way they can do number one.
Your worship, let's do that, because it is getting late and we're all probably getting tired, so better we have a chance to look at this another day. Nothing's gonna change between now and 2 weeks.
No.
So a bit for staff's information, I thought some of the points that he raised in the letter were good.
Yeah.
You know, noise mitigation, such as turning it around so that.
Yeah, blasting
the
out the
loudspeaker
water.
goes the other way
Yeah.
towards the water. It's higher up, people will be low. It seems, wow, why not? And I guess I'm not sure that that's the greatest location for logger sports. Like we have had other letters before about the chainsaw on the side, like a chainsaw going all day, if you live up that hill, it'd be awful. Like, I don't know. So anyway, I just thought.
That's a personal thing, it's hard to say, that's a real tough call, because I don't think they'll go back up to Veterans Park.
I move that this item be deferred until the which meeting?
Referred back to
There.
staff.
Referred back.
First back to
We'll
staff.
refine
We'll
the
bring it back a couple
Okay.
weeks.
Be referred back to staff and brought to a
future council.
future council meeting. Okay.
Yeah.
Also,
Second.
yeah.
Okay, Rob, second, all in favor?
Yep.
Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay, thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, boys.
Okay, so we got 8.3.
Can I speak for a motion?
Sure can. Yeah.
So we have a request from Metro Vancouver to appoint a staff representative to the Metro Vancouver Intergovernmental Advisory Committee. And I spoke to Daniel earlier today, and as Director of Planning, he would be the most appropriate person. And he'll attend to the extent that he feels necessary.
Okay. That's perfect. So we'll put Daniel Martin.
So be appropriate for you to move that motion and inserting Daniel's name.
Yeah.
I move that council appoint Daniel
Martin.
Martin, thank you, as a staff representative of Bowen Island Municipality on the Metro Vancouver Intergovernmental Advisory Committee.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Unanimous.
So on that letter, point D, it's talking about Metro Vancouver Board is, it sounds like they're gonna come out and do presentations on the 2050 plan. It says direct staff to offer, Metro staff, each member jurisdiction, us, the opportunity to co-host a public information meeting on Metro 2050 aligned with respective council presentations. So if I'm reading that correctly, they're gonna come out here and make a presentation on Metro 2050 to us,
If we ask them to, Alice.
if we ask them to.
Yeah.
But they'll make it a public information meeting. So do we want that? Because I think this is time sensitive in responding to that one as well.
I doubt that part, it could be.
It's not really referenced anywhere else in the.
But it's at its October meeting, the board of directors adopted the following resolution. Direct Metro staff to offer each Bowen Island the opportunity to co-host a public information meeting on Metro 2050 aligned with respective council presentations.
Perhaps staff could confirm, when they confirm Daniel as our representative, they could ask for clarification
Yeah,
of
I
that.
think that's a great idea.
Because if they're gonna come out here and do a council presentation, then we try, at least advertise it and do it as a bit of a public information.
Like, this wouldn't be any emergency. This public consultation will go throughout this entire year.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure about the timeline on
Yeah.
that one.
It's not balanced.
Okay, do you need a recommendation about that? Or staff can
No,
just
I
follow
don't-
up, right?
We've got it.
Yeah.
Okay,
We'll have Daniel follow up and he'll report back to you.
and was that, and then,
Now, there is another recommendation there in B8 that I
Yeah.
think we need to go through. The council received correspondence from Metro Vancouver regarding proposed amendment. Metro Vancouver 2040, sharing our future, and the council provide comments to Metro Vancouver prior to the January 17th, 2020 submission deadline.
So,
That's
Your
probably-
Worship, I talked to Daniel about this as well,
Yeah.
and he said that we're not really part of that Metro strategic plan. That we're outside of that. And
Yes,
I'm
that's
looking at
true.
Councillor Hawking, who
Yes.
understands better than me,
Yeah.
but that's kind of, so Daniel wasn't concerned about, because he's had that letter for a while now, so he wasn't acting on it, so I followed up on it today, he said, the reason is, we're not really part of it, and so he didn't really feel that,
Well,
it was important that we contribute to it.
Slightly disagree. What this is about is, because they are changing the climate change plan, to make it zero carbon by 2050, that's an element that goes into the regional plan as well. Now, we don't have to abide by the regional plan because we're not
The regional growth
the
strategy.
regional growth strategy. But the regional growth strategy is very useful to us in a number of ways. So I actually wrote a response to this, it's kind of scribbled, that goes something like this. That Bowen Island Council supports the revision to Metro Vancouver 2040 to align with the latest science and be carbon neutral by 2050. But then there's an ask in here that could be useful for us. And Bowen Island Council has adopted the same target of zero emissions by 2050. In order to meet that target, Bowen Island is in the process of developing a new climate change strategy. The strategy focuses on transportation because the vast majority of Bowen's GHG emissions are from vehicles traveling to off-island destinations and from BC Ferries. For this reason, we requested in the development of Metro Vancouver 2050, serious consideration be given to foot passenger service as an alternative to BC Ferries.
Electric ferry for passengers.
Yes, sure, electric, you can put in there as well. So
like
that way, because I've already made that request
Yeah,
through the Climate Action Committee, so that aligns with,
yeah, I like that.
okay,
If you need a motion,
Can you hold on? Your comments are related to the 2050, Metro 2050. This letter is specifically asking about Metro 2040
no, Metro 2040 being amended,
being amended.
Yeah.
yeah, because of the Metro,
It says it's amending 2030.
yeah, that's a mistake, should be 2040.
We really,
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you that in the larger picture, the Metro decisions and the Metro policies are important to us. But in the interest of time, I mean, this is January the 17th, they're requesting feedback. We don't really need to say anything because they've already put it out there what they're going to be amending. And there'll be the opportunity through the intergov committee that Daniel's going to be on to provide input. So I agree with
Well,
Daniel.
this is
This
gonna
one
go,
isn't
this is
critical.
gonna go to Heather McNell, and I want Heather McNell to see that we need that. She's the director of planning, and she's part of the management committee.
If your council agrees with it, I don't think there's any harm in doing that.
As opposed to what's here, right?
Yeah,
Well,
it's
there's
just a
no way
simple
we're
letter,
gonna
it's just
be able
saying,
to provide any comments in the next 4 days, other than what David's written,
Yeah.
unless we're all gonna sit down here.
I move that Councillor David Hawking's wording be provided as comment to the Metro Vancouver 2040, sharing our future proposed amendments, period.
I recognize we're all tired, had enough. And this is.
No,
That would work, it just says, let's
Can you
use your
give, can you
wording.
give that to Hope, David?
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm gonna second your motion. And
Do that tomorrow. I think we've got
any
a
further
general.
discussion on that?
We're gonna do it tomorrow.
I think just a general, that council provide a response to the correspondence from Metro Vancouver regarding proposed amendments to the
From
Metro
Councilor
Vancouver.
Hawking, yeah.
And I will do
Say
this
that.
tomorrow. I got a dentist appointment right off, but I'll do it in the
As
afternoon.
discussed at the January 13th meeting.
Yeah, that's fine,
Okay.
yeah, I'll move that.
Okay.
Okay, got a second, someone? Okay, good. Okay, any further discussion, all in favor? Thank you, it's unanimous. So we don't have to do this other recommendation then?
No.
Okay, good. Reports of the committees, commissions, Mayor Standing Committee on Community Lands, Mayor Ander, Chair recommendation from the November 22nd meeting. In the discussion of the Mayor Standing Committee, we're talking about how we're gonna access this lot too.
Is this
And,
time sensitive?
I'm just,
Yeah,
I'm wondering
No,
too,
is
if
that,
it's
does
in
that
the-
have to work?
Huh?
Can we
Sort of
defer
is.
this?
yeah.
Sure. Okay.
And then-
And I'm also thinking some of these other ones.
Just asking for staff report, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, there's been all sorts of work done already, which I don't know that you guys are aware of, so I should figure that out first,
Work done where?
on this topic.
Okay. That would be good.
And I think it's something we did adventure, we've got Metro people coming to meet with us, so let's just open the discussion when they come.
And like Maureen said, what is it, Maureen? Is the Metro rep there? Or the engineer that's coming, or the engineer, right? He's in Metro Parks. So he could help us out there, so we're gonna defer that. Okay, so what else we got?
Motion to defer?
Transportation Advisory Committee.
Terry, can I put a motion to defer on that too? Because I think there's a lot in here, like that's 5
Yeah.
minutes on this, there's no way that that's gonna happen. I'm also looking, we gotta move it to close.
Yes, but also on this, Allison mentioned to me right at the beginning, there's no staff recommendation, so I think this really needs to go, because this came from the Transportation Advisory Committee, and now it needs to go to staff.
Yeah.
Staff has some data around this.
Okay.
Yeah, and we've got our transportation master plan and
Yeah.
all those things, right?
Okay, good, because, yeah,
Yep. I like how fast we're moving.
9.3.
We actually need a motion to defer.
Okay.
I move we defer 9.1 and 9.2 to a future council meeting.
Second.
Okay, thank you, all in favor? Deferred.
Yeah.
9.3, Community Economic Development Committee, Nicholson and Morris, recommendation,
We can defer 9.3 too.
okay.
Update on Metro Vancouver, there isn't one.
The recommendation is that we defer 9.3 to a future council meeting.
Yeah, all in favor.
Thank you, all in favor? Thank you. Unanimous.
Can we defer the update?
Yeah, we defer them to.
Yes.
There's nothing to,
There's nothing.
Nothing.
nobody's had.
Well,
Do it later, there's nothing time.
nothing time.
Okay, we've done the items removed from the consent agenda. Did we do that?
Yeah,
We did, yeah.
yeah.
That's good.
Okay.
So, Bronwyn,
I'm really sorry I have to ask this one. The minutes of the VIMTAC meeting say that the multi-use pathway's been deferred. Is that indefinitely, or is that just from its timeline last summer?
no, it's on hold. Yeah,
Indefinitely?
Well, no, I guess it's for budget consultation.
budget consultation and stuff, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Sheesh. Okay, so the